27. I can't. Yes, sir. Okay, we'd like to call the Utility Advisory Committee of the City of Lake City to order. Please call the roll.
Mr. Dial.
Here.
Ms. Field. Here. Mr. Ford.
Here.
Mr. Hunter.
Here.
Mr. Jefferson. Mr. Kraus.
Here.
Mr. Murphy. Chairman Sanders.
Here. Okay, we had the minutes attached. I think everybody got those in the package. It was sent out for the June 23rd meeting. I'd entertain a motion to approve those. Have a motion.
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, approval of agenda. We have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All right, we have a motion second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, persons wishing to address the committee, do we have any requests? Okay, well, go ahead, Stu, you're right there, and then,
Yeah, can. Go ahead, he's the chair.
go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Nice to be here this afternoon. I have a question. The college property at the college, I see Dr. Barrett's here tonight. All the roads, I believe, they're either owned by the city or the county. I'm not sure which. I haven't looked at the map for some time. But while the buildings sit on property that I believe belongs to the college, the roads do not belong to the college. They're public roads. My understanding is I've been hearing through the grapevines for the last, I don't know, a couple months, I guess. And I never heard it at a college board meeting, that the college, or at least Dr. Barrett, doesn't want the utilities to use some of their roads as right-of-ways for utilities. I know I spoke to Mr. Kraus this afternoon and I made a verbal request for any documentation that he had got from the college regarding use of the roads. And being that Rocky's here, I'm making that same, well, that's Mr. Kraus, the same request at this meeting, but I'll mail it in, don't you worry. That those roads belong to everybody in Columbia County, actually everybody, period. So that for the college to come and say that they don't want anybody to use the roads, I don't know what the justification with that would be. I presume we may hear that this afternoon. But I also, and I would just ask you to consider this, I go to a lot of meetings, don't know what the authority would be. I've looked through the minutes of the college. I haven't seen where the college board, those are the folks appointed by the governor, say that they don't want any municipality to use their roads to put in utilities. So I just want to get the information from the city and the information from the county. I look forward to what the president of the college has to say, and enjoy the rest of the meeting. Good luck with your utilities. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Dr. Barrett.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for allowing me to address you today. Florida Gateway College continues to be concerned and request that meetings be held with both the city and county regarding utilities, roadways, stormwater issues, property disputes, and annexation requests. I see on your agenda today that there's a possible action regarding water main locations, etc., regarding the mega industrial site. After various meetings with the previous city manager, the prior county manager, and now the current county manager, we've had great conversations and collegial discussions, but the college issues and problems with many of these issues don't seem to make it to deliberative bodies, and these issues only present themselves after actions by the county and city make the college react and become defensive because there is no communication. What I'm asking here is let's be good neighbors. It seems that both the county and city government bodies do not know of our concerns or conversations regarding these issues and plans that we believe impact our college, an enterprise that impacts Columbia County in the amount of $88 million per year in economic activity for our county, and impacts close to 5,000 students that are served by FGC in our 5-county service area and also parts of Florida. I can go into detail specifically with each general item I mentioned above, but I do not believe the time and place for those issues are today. And but consider that they're all interrelated. However, I will specifically address the proposed water line issue that is on your agenda today. The college has issues with the proposed preferred site in your packets, specifically the water line behind the college library that is on Swanner River Water Management property and has significant documented wetlands located on the roadway that exists on that property and where the proposed preferred water line is being proposed. This land is constantly flooding on college property and has caused significant stormwater issues for the college for many years, as recently as 2 weeks ago with the tropical storm. Secondly, after reviewing the Utilities Advisory Board meeting last month, it was stated that roadways, planning development of this site have existed for 5 years. That is correct, but those are just preliminary plans, and many of those plans are in conflict with each other if you see all the different plans. I would encourage each of you to review those plans and roadways because those roadways and plans significantly impact Florida Gateway College. Thirdly, I would state that the plans of that site have dramatically changed, including both actions of your government bodies, both the county and city, that have significantly approved preliminary approval of residential communities that have increased by 70% the number of housing units. The housing type has also changed dramatically. My point here is that statements made about tentative planning of 5 years ago does not take into consideration drastic changes in locations, types of development, and also the density of the project that is being proposed today. Finally, I want to be clear with all of you that the goal for FGC is the same as both the county and city, to develop a well-planned development of the mega industrial site, that helps our county, region, and the college flourish. Currently, the college does not feel the efforts currently underway have been collaborative, but have placed the college in a position of opposition rather than a partnership that will benefit all. My goal today is to change that dynamic by appearing before you, that all of us, the county, city, and college, work together to make this a true partnership that benefits all of Columbia County. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, going to old business discussion, possible action and status of items.
Well, a lot of the stuff that, you have the update sheets in your package, which is basically the projects, and a lot of them ain't, Jamie's gonna touch on anyway. So instead of just sitting there reading off this, the major thing is the 4775, from the last meeting we had. Jones Edmond and the city did submit the, grant for the shortfall, the 1.4 point some million, plus an additional $475,000 grant for the RV park. That's the biggest change on that one right there, plus the fact that this did go before council and was agreed to move forward with the funding and everything to go ahead and issue notice to proceed once all the paperwork and everything gets back to us and Jones Edmond.
And Jamie's bringing the shovel and starting work.
Yes.
Very good. Okay, so that brings us to Jamie's part anyway. So if you want to go ahead and come on down.
Hello, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Hope y'all are doing well today. Always a pleasure to be here despite the weather today. I'm happy to provide updates on any specific questions you have about all the ongoing projects. I did work with Mr. Dial on the update sheet that's in your packet, and so I have added on to that. As he said, the biggest change is with the 4775. We did submit those grant applications, and as you know, at the last city council meeting, it was the lowest responsive bidders bid was approved to move that project forward as well. So I believe contracting is underway. We included in that bid for the 4775 project that they needed to, once they were under contract, submit proof of ordering materials within 2 weeks. So we know that they are making steps forward in the process, especially with how challenging the construction environment is right now and how long it's taking to get material orders in. And then as soon as those materials are received by the contractor, they are to begin construction, and they have 12 months of a construction window. When we hear back from them that the materials are on their way, we'll be here shortly. We want to start planning a groundbreaking ceremony as well to invite all of the elected officials, the stakeholders involved in the project, as well as the state grant funding officials and the governor's office, all that good stuff. And so we've had preliminary discussions with city staff on the logistics of the groundbreaking ceremony. We're just waiting to have a better idea of when we expect the material order to begin so that we know construction will actually be beginning when we have that groundbreaking. So that's the big one on 4775. A lot of my projects are kind of.
Yeah.
It's moving forward. No, it's great. As I said, I'm going to touch on a lot of my projects individually with other items on the agenda. And so if you have specific questions or things you'd like me to address in the general update, I'm happy to do so. Otherwise, I'm also good to move forward in the agenda at your leisure.
Yeah, let's move forward, and then at the end, anything we miss, we'll all come back and ask whatever questions we still have for you. Because I'm sure you probably have all the answers already.
We'll see. So the next item on the agenda is the master plan update. We have met with city staff on the water, wastewater, and natural gas to have technical data collection meetings to start determining kind of what data is remaining to come in so we can finish developing the field data collection plans. We will have those plans drafted and to city staff in the next few weeks. We are just also trying to hammer out our data sharing mechanisms. We've switched to a new data sharing service. We've gone from OneDrive to ShareFile because it's just a little bit more user friendly and we can be more specific about the, I don't want to say safety, but of how careful we are with sharing certain levels of data across the board as we develop the project. We want to be good stewards of that data and be cognizant of, again, the federal guidelines regarding the Homeland Security cautions with water, wastewater, and natural gas information. But we still want to be good partners with the city and the county to make sure everyone has the data that they need to make good decisions moving forward. And so I think we've landed on a good file sharing setup, and I sent invites out to all of the city staff members to do that kind of final data dump that lets us move into the field data collection phase. And so that is moving forward slowly but surely, and we are going to be starting that field phase where we actually put out equipment to collect data that helps us calibrate the models here in the next month. That'll be kicking off. So that one is moving along. I don't know if I have anything other more concrete to offer on the master plan because this is kind of we're still getting all the information together so that we know what we don't have so we can go out and get it.
Now, one question on that. So on the share file, you're planning on how it's going to interface so that the county has full access to what they need. And now the idea is to share everything that we can without any restriction on that, other than what, whatever's limited by that piece from the Homeland Security. But I know from talking to David previously, they have a way to do that in place where they limit the access on their end. And so is that what you're looking at too, is how they're going to utilize that? I think you'd mentioned, David, maybe having one person be the access point on your side.
Well, we had offered to do a non-disclosure statement and to limit our access to the county engineer. Because quite frankly, the data would be somewhat irrelevant to the rest of us. We would all go to Chad and say, Chad, what does this mean? He's a technical person.
And I think that works. I think it makes sense to limit it because there are some things, we want to share everything that they need to move forward on their side too, because working together, it makes more sense. And that way we have the right pipes in the right places for the growth where we need it. But with that data sharing, is it something that's compatible with the current systems that are in place? Do we know?
Yes, sir,
Or
it
is
should
it-
be. And the raw data that is being provided by the city, we are not receiving the root data, we're receiving copies of it so that it can't be messed up, if you will, and so that the city staff is able to track modifications or additions that Jones Edmond staff make to the database so that that can be incorporated according to your standards. And then I've also spoken with the county engineer about the data that he would need to review in order to do his technical review of the products we're putting together. That's the actual model data, the mapping that we're creating, things of that nature. And so I've talked to Mr. Dial, and I think we have a good idea of what Mr. Williams would need. And I think it comes down to city and county leadership if you want to work out something in writing that does limit the scope of access. But otherwise, the file sharing database that we are using allows you to limit people to just viewing versus viewing and editing, viewing and downloading, et cetera. And so we will be able to be careful to protect the city's data while still offering the county staff what they need to do a full technical review of the product.
Can you give us an example of that specific data you're talking about needs to be protected?
Sure, so the exact, okay, let me back up. The sure was too early to say that. I don't know enough about the Homeland Security requirements on the federal side. We have folks that deal directly with that who are really well versed in it. And oftentimes we lean on our utility partners to make those decisions, but oftentimes it's related to specific locations of pieces of infrastructure, access points into that infrastructure. So it, for example, may be okay for the locations of pipelines to be visible to the public, but valves and other access points should not be accessible to the public. And that comes from, for example, on the water system, not wanting someone to be able to get in and poison the water supply, if you will. Like, I don't want to freak anyone out saying that that's going to happen, but that's one example of something that would need to be protected. And that's also why a lot of your facilities are behind lock and key. They're behind fences to prevent nefarious actors from coming in and messing with it, and or to prevent people from dumping things into the sewer system, for example, that the wastewater plants can't process, and then they get sent to your wetland, which can enter the environment. We'll need to, before we create any publicly available products, we will need to review those federal laws to ensure that we're not sharing any data that we can't. But we've talked to Mr. Williams about the data that he would need to review the model. And so in that, I think we do feel comfortable sharing with him specifically, which is, for example, the sizes of the pipes and the materials, which is what goes into the modeling of how the system works. But Paul, do you have other input as to kind of the types of data that we're trying not to kind of make public domain at this point?
Yes, the data that I will not make public is our entire system. That is water, sewer, and natural gas. I don't have a problem sharing any reports, any modeling information, but a geodatabase of our whole system is something that I personally, and as a protector of this system, will not feel comfortable sharing based on safety and other parameters. Now, that's not to say that certain sections cannot be cut out. We don't share our complete database with anyone, developers or anyone. They come in and they ask for a specific area, and they call in locates, and we mark up the area, and we'll send them a map showing what is their size of pipes, things like that. But as far as our entire system, our entire database, that is something, unless we're instructed from management to share, I'm not comfortable sharing that.
It's sort of like the entire connectivity of the system and what goes where. That's more of what you'd want to protect, again, to prevent nefarious actors from going in and doing something at location A that will affect location B. So you don't want to share the entire database with every piece of data you've ever collected on your system, but the items that are necessary to evaluate how water flows through that system would be like the pipe diameter, the pipe material, the pipe age, and that's information that we could share for discrete project areas so that the model could be technically reviewed by county staff, and that's the input we're looking for. We're also definitely interested in sharing and we want to work collaboratively on the locations of the projects and the project improvements and where those will be, and to incorporate new developments within the county to make sure that they can be serviced appropriately with the infrastructure that's in place or the new infrastructure that's being recommended. It's just, as Paul said, you want to be careful not to share the entire thing in one fell swoop so people know exactly how it all kind of runs, if that makes sense.
I think the county's concern is that our engineer have access to whatever is necessary to design future enhancements and expansions and projects that would be related to everybody at the table.
And there would be no issue with that, Mr. Kraus. If Chad came up and said he had a project on West 90, there's no issue giving that whole area that would affect to be able to get the stuff there. It's just putting our whole system out there is the issue that I have.
And we certainly don't want anything that we don't have a need for.
Well, that's what I mean. In any development areas you come up with, we can cut those sections out, make separate databases for those if that's what's required. You know, that's not an issue. It wouldn't hinder any projects or any information that, Chad would need for his, development.
I've got a question about that. So, and maybe Jamie will answer. So let's say it's, I think we're like in a four-dimensional structure. So one, the taps and the inputs are kind of crucial. Those are the things that you don't want people generally, because if you look on websites, like I think you can see where, things are generally.
Yes.
So is there a way to have strided data where they can get everything they need as far as the development, the flows and the rates without giving just that piece of where the taps are, exactly? Would that work kind of for what y'all are doing? And then I think that would alleviate the problem too of having to make, separate databases, although we can be more detailed in the separate database, because then you can see if you've got a project, there is something there to tap to.
Yeah, and along those lines, Chairman, when a development comes up, we're the ones that do most of the flow test anyway through the city itself. So that's something that we would do anyway to give that information along with the pipe sizes and everything else. So all that information is supplied when we get a request for data like that. They call Ashley, the Mike's department, and they do the flow test on the hydrants to see how much pressure is in that area. So
I think the big deal generally is knowing, what is available where, and that's always the case with utilities, especially in a growth format. So being able to communicate that in a way that's usable data is important.
Again, the reason the county has the concern is it's like Bell Road's a perfect example. We went out, we hired Arcadis to do the design of the utilities. We need whatever information is necessary for them to be able to do that. Not for, anything not related to specific projects.
I just don't understand this.
Where's the holdup on the bill? Let's use that. Where's the holdup on our cable side as far as information?
That would be a question to ask Chad.
Paul, do you remember anything?
and there was any issue with holding any information, we give them everything they want. Because the only thing we had out here at the time was the water and sewer that we had there. We give them the flow test and everything else on the lines that we had there. Anything Chad ever called for, even Arcadis, we talked to them several times. If they had a request, they need us to do another test on something, we give it to them.
And you're not specifically saying there was an issue there.
No, I'm not saying there was an issue. That's just the type of project we're talking about. We're designing extensions that ultimately we would give to the city. We did the same thing with Plantation Park, where we designed water lines that eventually tied into the city. Whatever information those engineers need is what we're asking.
And Chad's given the list of what information they need, right?
We've discussed it, yes, sir. We are not at the stage in the process where he's ready to do that review. And so I think when we get closer to it, we'll work with the city's GIS manager, who we've already had discussions about ways to package the data that the county needs without, again, causing any potential harm or risk. And he's prepared to do
Yeah,
that.
because the other piece of it, they don't need to have, I mean, if we can make it, the less they have to interact and come back and say, hey, we need this piece, when they already should have access to it. That's the big concern. No, not slowing it down with extra red tape on the areas they need.
Yes, sir.
So making an interface so that, what he needs, he has available throughout.
And we intend to have workshops with both city and county staff to review the model before we submit it for technical evaluation. And so at that time, I think Mr. Williams can provide us the list of what exactly he needs in order to, quality check the modeling and to do his technical review. And we'll work with city staff to provide what he needs, as long as it keeps the city safe.
I mean, it seems like the ultimate goal, Paul, that once this all comes together, it's gonna be relatively easy and fast for you to be able to put forth this information.
Yes, sir, and the other caveat to that is, even though you might have the information that shows that there's a 12-inch line there, you got a 6-inch sewer, you have a 1-inch gas line, any of that, water, sewer, or gas. All those areas are affected what is upstream and downstream. So regardless, even if you have pipe sizes and everything else, you're still gonna have to come to the city. If you're building a development, say just on Bell Street, you're building a development there, even if you have all the line sizes and everything, you're still gonna have to come to the city to get work on the system every day to know what capacity is, what we can get to them, what we can get out of it. That's the issues that we've worked together before, because we can only supply so much and take so much from it. So it's gonna be a collaborative effort regardless. Even if you had all of the information, even if you had the entire, Chad had the entire database, he can look at the lines, but he's still not gonna be able to tell what gets from point A to point B to get back to our plan.
Right, and any design we do would have to be approved by the
Yeah.
city as well, because, you know, ultimately it's gonna be part of your system.
So when's the end game here, Jamie?
We're countdown 11 months at this point to final report.
11 months till,
So the final report is submitted to the city and the county for review, yes, sir. So like I said, in just a few weeks here, as we finish up gathering our data, we are going to develop our field data collection plans to fill in the gaps and get the information needed to calibrate the models. And then we have a couple of months of field data collection and model development. And then we will come to city and county staff to review those models we develop, make sure it actually captures what you know to be true on the ground, not just what we've put in the computer. We'll do some iteration to tweak that and make sure we're all happy with kind of what it's putting out. And then we run the scenarios based on this projected demand over the next 20 years that we're looking at in 5, 10, and 20-year increments. And that will help us to identify basically the problem areas, maybe not now, but in the future when that demand increases. And we'll work with city and county staff to look at those problem areas and come up with solutions. And that'll be our capital improvement projects. And so that list, again, will be sort of iterative. We'll work together. You know, there's what our model says will work versus what is practical on the ground for city staff who actually operate the system and for the development that you know is coming. And the last thing we do is to develop a series of cost estimates and project one-pagers, if you will, which is what we'll use to submit for grant funding. So a summary page for each of these capital improvement projects that lists the description, the benefit, the cost, and the schedule. And all that gets packaged into a final report that summarizes all of the effort. And so at this point, we're, like I said, we're still collecting data, but we're on track within the overall project schedule, which was 1 year total.
Jamie, one thing I would like to do, so the red flagged areas or the areas that are issues, that's something we definitely, as far as we can, we definitely need to share that, because that's one of the big things is knowing where are the restrictions in the system. And I think everybody needs to know where that is so we can all be on the same page as we go forward saying, let's put this, you know, work with the developer here and see, well, that's got a restriction that's going to be $10 million to fix. I mean, so it's good if we share the information on where the restrictions are, like right up front. That's like the most important thing to me.
Yes, and that's the model. We'll have a model workshop to go over the model that we develop, and then we'll have another workshop to go over sort of those red flag areas, as you call them. And so everyone will get to see it and discuss it, and then a summary of what we find, including maps, will be in the final report. So it'll show the locations and kind of describe the issues that we're seeing. We typically in the past have developed tables that kind of show, you know, X, Y, and Z problems based on the level of service provided by city and county staff. And that's what we use to then develop the projects.
And you said 11 months?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I thought it was going to be done in like March next year, so I'm a little off. I'd have to go back and look at the
I'll double
contract.
check.
Just thinking about it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any more questions on the master plan or anything?
so the restriction data and everything, as far as from Bell Road, we'll call it, that survey has already been done, where the restrictions are in between here and St. Mark, correct?
Yes, that was the grant worked on with the county
Correct.
to do that.
Okay.
And it wasn't all inclusive, but it was enough to show us pretty much that John Devlin was able to identify a lot of the areas, what we need to do to fix that.
Gotcha.
I'll actually be presenting on that later in this meeting, going through the projects that we found and kind of what that looks like. So we'll have to update that because for what it's worth, the evaluation of Bell Road was exclusively based on a singular entity coming in. It was forget the code name for that project, but it was the one that had 1 line, 2 lines, and then the full build out. And so we looked at, you know, the very near term, what that would do to the system, and then full build out included the full business plus population growth. And so we would have updated information on potential businesses coming into that area, just tweak the numbers, but we did already develop the model for that portion. So we're a little bit ahead on that corridor. And so kind of the rest of the city that we're adding on to that model that we started.
Well, I for one just have a hard time understanding what the city actually thinks that we're gonna do with this information, that they can't trust us with it. I mean, if we're gonna be partners, we need to be partners. If we're not, I don't know where we go from here. The way I feel about it.
Is it possible, and I don't know, I'm still, of course, very new to this, and I understand that this is the county's project. Is it possible for Lake City to actually, the city to actually perform the works of all the utilities, since obviously we know utilities very well, no offense? Is that possible? Because we are considering partnering. Is that possible, Mr. Krause?
Well, it would depend. My board's been very clear that we want to partner with the city where we
Right.
can. But in those areas where we can't partner with the city, that we would proceed how we would need to. So we've always been open to partnering with the county or with the city. But there have been times where the city said it's not practical. So those are the areas. The best example I always give is South Columbia. You know, we have interests for water and sewer in the south half of the county. Don't know that the city does. So, you know, it doesn't make sense necessary, you know.
Well, I
It
mean,
just really depends on where we're willing to partner and where we're not.
right. I mean, either way, there's still gonna be some type of, I don't wanna say downfall, but there are areas where we simply cannot disclose certain information, and not that we do not want to help, but I'm looking at it from a whole nother angle, and since we already know utilities and we're good at what we do, why can't we just do the utilities for you on this particular project as some type of partnership? And I'm just suggesting.
In the
And that
past,
way
it's
it
been a
puts
question
all
of
of
the
this-
city willing to do it.
I think that's the biggest thing that, you know, coming in as recent as I have even, is just knowing that there's been times when the county's asked the city to do things that maybe weren't like the south of the county. I'm talking about years ago and coming forward even more recently,
Right.
where it seemed like the city didn't have interest. Now, I don't know how sometimes the will of the city was relayed through past management across. So I think that's a fair.
Well, it's
Yeah.
because essentially, like Paul said, you're still gonna have to come to us regardless.
For the flow rates and everything like that. But I do think, and getting back to Mr. Ford's point, I think everything that and Jamie, I don't know what the answer is. I'm for sharing everything we can share, that there's not a restriction on any legal issue. So, I know a lot of times the information you see, like if you go to Matt or whoever in GIS, and he would pull up a map, and he could pull up a map that would show water lines, I'm sure he could, but it doesn't show you where you can hook to. And so that piece, it's not that we don't want to share it or can't, you know, see a reason you would need it. It's just, I don't know why that piece would have to be. But if you overlaid it and you had all the pipes that were there and just not the hookups, would that work? I'm just trying to figure, because if not, there's other things we could do. I mean, Chad could technically, I wouldn't say deputize, but there's things we could do that would allow him more access, but he'd have more accountability to the system. So, because that's a lot of liability you're taking on. I mean, we see every day, look at the water supply that just within the last 60 or 90 days, they tried to tap into it in Zephyr Hills, I think. And that was a pretty big deal. So
Right.
it's not what you guys will do with it. We know you guys aren't gonna do anything crazy, but every time that's shared, there's a new opportunity for it to become public. And when it becomes public, you don't make it unpublic. And I think that's the biggest issue if I'm reading it correctly. So
That's right.
it's not that we don't trust anyone there. I mean, we know about losing things through the internet. We were a good example of that through the piracy that happened here recently. So the more it's moved, the more opportunity there is. But if we can make the data points where they can see everything but that one little restricted piece, I mean, what percentage would that be? Do you know?
I couldn't say off the top of my head, but I can say that there are certainly ways to share the data in a safer manner. Like I said, I've discussed with the GIS manager, and of course, it's at city management's discretion, but there are ways to, for example, give Mr. Williams a city account to the online system that the city can
Yes.
use, where
That could work.
and you'll see actually with the Bell Road presentation I'm giving later, it's sort of it's a part of the online GIS data housing system. And I sent it to Mr. Dial yesterday, and I realized he couldn't actually look at it because it's only available to Jones Evans employees. And so I could make it publicly available, but then literally it's available to the entire public worldwide, and there's no in between. The solution is to give whoever within your organization basically username and password, and that is something that Mr. Dumas would potentially be able to do, and then it would only be Mr. Williams' username and password within the city's database, and it would not actually be something we physically give to the county, but something that the county is accessing within the city system. And so there are certainly workarounds there that I think we can definitely explore. And you can also, again, kind of check the box whether you're sharing one specific thing or not, turn layers on and off. Mr. Kraus and I were kind of discussing how GIS works, and there's definitely ways to do it, and we're willing to work together to figure out what Mr. Williams needs to see and the easiest way to give that to him. And we just kind of need to workshop, think internally, city staff on the most comfortable way to do that.
Well, and I like the idea of having a login right into the system. I think that limits the travel that it's going. So the fewer systems it's on, the better. I think if it stays on our system and he can log in to see it, and then two, everything's tracked. So that,
And you know who's on the system.
exactly. So, I mean, that sounds like a good solution.
But at the end game, nobody's got, Paul's, department's not ever gonna turn the valve on until everything's in place.
That's right.
There's gotta be stages that, you know, Chad can go in there and be talking to a developer or something like that there, but no information's bilaterally shared with the developer, but you know, what his part needs to take place. And then, of course, as soon as he starts access, that's when him and Paul go into communication, you know, or, you know, whoever's representing.
Well, with each development too, when they come like that, that's when the specialized reports are created. So you
And I get the point that you don't want to just come up here today and, you know, in the city, Lake City or Marion County, whoever, well, this is what we designed. Well, we didn't know nothing about this, you know, this won't work here because of this. So it's got to be a bilateral cooperation from A to Z. It's just that simple. And you know, with all the mess going on in the world, I understand the format of, I know some things that went on in Marion County when some of their vital information leaks out. And you know, it's a concern. I mean, I understand it's a big show, but you know, I think this is a process we got to take forward. But you know, we're here just to work with you. This, you know, I've said it before, you know, I don't care who does it, but
Which
we
is why I
do
said
know,
what I said.
but we do know the county, you know, we've already been through this, we've got a lot more access to grants than well, you know. And so that's the reason, I mean, in all the year, I know you're new, well, you're not new, but this is the first time in 20-something years that the county and the city's got even to this point. So we are moving.
And I'm
But
gonna
at the
take-
same time, oh, I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
but at the same time, I think issues like this is the reason we haven't moved forward in 30 years.
That's right.
That we need to get past stuff like this here and start working as a team and start working as partners. And not saying in a public meeting, well, I can't trust you with this or you can't trust me with this. I think this is why we're where we're at over the last 30 years, is issues just like this.
We gotta be able to, you know, that's their engineer, and then of course, it's, you know, our county engineer, but you're exactly right. We got to be able to, no, I ain't saying have a free reign, but you know, the checks and balances must be made in order to continue to go on a county level and of course, on the city.
And realistically, the way it's always worked in the past is we would get a grant, say like Plantation Park. We would build it using the grant money, using city specifications, using the city's manual in consultation with the city, and turn it over to the city at the end. That's what we did in Plantation Park Road. That's been traditionally what we did. The areas that the county is doing differently are those areas that the city has expressed an inability or to serve. So those are the areas. Ellisville being the prime example. We have a water system and a sewer system in Ellisville, because at the time, it was 2006, 2007, the city, for whatever reason, made the decision not to serve. So he ended up serving. So it's not that we don't want to work with the city, it's just where we can work with the city, we want to work with the city. Where the city doesn't seem to want to work or doesn't have the interest in doing it, we've tended to do it ourselves.
Can I say a couple things? First of all, Mr. Ford, it's not saying that we don't trust you, but there's certain things under federal guidelines that we cannot share,
Right.
okay? We have certain things that we cannot share. Now, our raw data is our raw data. When this board was formed and we started this master plan, we said we had no problem sharing the reports that were completed so you guys could see where things are. But there's certain raw data out there that we are not allowed to share. It's not that we don't want to. It's not that we don't trust you. It's just it can't be shared.
Yeah, it don't have anything to do with that. We just cannot share it, period.
And as far as 06 or 07, Mr. Kraus, if I may interject there, the city bought 4 private utilities back in that time. And they planned on running to Ellisville.
They did.
They bought Brandon Brent. And it was to go to Ellisville and then come back around. And that's when the county built the new plant and stuff there. And the city never even went to Brandon Brent after that. Brandon Brent stayed at Package Plant. So
But originally, the county did not plan to build a water and sewer plant in Ellisville. There was
they
going
had
to
a
be an
small plant there as
interconnection.
it was. They rebuilt it bigger.
That was a private system. That was not a public system.
Okay. But we were going to go through and pick up that private system.
Because that was owned by GL Summers.
So, I mean,
And the water plant wasn't there at all.
there's a lot of back and forth about trust with the city and the county. And like I said, it's
But all I
not
was saying wasn't that,
anything that I can't share, it's because I'm federally guided that I can't share it.
all I
It's
was-
not that I don't trust you. It's not that I don't want to assist, but there's certain things. I just had an RRA done, risk assessment done, okay? That been done for us, okay? It was enacted by the federal government. EPA mandated us to do this. But we can't even give it to the EPA. All we can do is give them a certification that we had it done. Only a paper copy can be held with us. It can't go out anywhere.
but we're not asking for that.
Well, and I think that's more the issue. I think,
We're not asking for those information.
yeah,
Some of my treatment process, some of my pumping,
Again,
that's
not
the
what-
only
how my system
information that I'm
works.
aware of. It's not.
it cannot go out.
But that's not what we're asking.
Different pumps that come on, how we fill stuff, how we move stuff and stuff like that. It just legally, it can't go out.
No, and I don't think that's not at all the request. So they're asking for the usable data. They're not asking for that piece now.
Exactly. And we've already
and-
made that agreement when this master plan is done and these reports are done, that they will be able to see and use these reports to help them and help us. But there is certain raw data that just cannot be transferred out. It has to stay within us.
And the point of the Ellisville conversation wasn't to cast aspersions on us. I wasn't here then. You weren't here then.
I wasn't here then,
None of us were here then.
but I've
Our predecessors had these conversations between the city and county for a long extended period. And for
back
whatever
a few
reason,
months ago, I was privy to
But-
see quite a bit of information of
for whatever
either
reason,
Fort White and everything else, because it was planned we were gonna go all the way to Fort White too and come back around.
absolutely, for whatever reason at the time, city and county could not reach an agreement. And that is why this county got into the water and sewer business in Ellisville. Because for whatever reason, it wasn't gonna happen. I'm from the city.
Well, I do
No,
know that
I'm
the
not gonna
city,
cast aspersions.
we ran a route all the way to Fort White, how we were gonna run it there, we were gonna run it back to Ellisville and back over to Brandon Brent, come back up.
Absolutely.
And it was all done on the city's part, city paid for everything, they had everything ready to go, and Ellisville was built, and everything stopped where it
But
stopped.
Ellisville
Well, the
wasn't
city
built,
stopped at
But
Brandon
Ellisville
Brent.
wasn't built until the agreement between the city and county fell apart.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing important to remember is that people here weren't there here then. So,
None of us were.
so I think going, and that's one thing I accuse some people at the county of remembering things 40 years ago. And people know who that is, but we got to think about what's going forward to get on the right, same page. And I think that's the crucial piece, what you just said. So anything that we're not restricted from sharing legally, we need to share. And
That's been our intention the whole time.
yeah, and so that, and not anything to do with the trust issue, because it's just limiting the data that we can share. And that shouldn't withhold anything that's needed in the planning stages to move forward. And the main thing is making sure that the data is shared in a way that it's usable when you get it. That's more important to me than the other piece, because without having that usable data, I mean, you could get reports after reports, but if you can't use it for an actual plan or to move forward and do something, then it's useless, so.
And all I'm saying is, if we're gonna share everything that's legally able to share, why does this keep coming up that we're not gonna share this with you? We're not gonna share this with you. I mean, I say every time I go to a meeting, I hear that, we're not gonna share this with you. I mean, if legally you cannot share it, you can't share it. I understand that. So why does this keep coming up in every meeting I come to, that we're not gonna share this with you? I heard this twice, 3 Fridays ago, that we're not gonna share this information. I don't feel comfortable sharing this information.
So
I'm not asking you to share any information that's not legal, but that you can't legally share. But any information that we help fund that's legally to share, that's what I won't share.
And I thought that's what our.
But I didn't too, but
That's
that's
what
coming up every meeting. We're not gonna share this information.
But we just want to make sure that it's clear that you're asking for everything and we can't supply everything.
But we're not asking for it. We have absolutely no reason to know, want to know, desire to know how you operate your plants.
Well, I think
We
that
want
was,
to know how to get capacity, services, potential development. And whatever data helps us get there is all we're looking for. How you handle your plants, whether it's a water
And
plant or
I
a sewer
thought that was
plant,
the reason why we
is
were doing that.
completely irrelevant.
Come up with this information.
that's exactly,
I
That's
couldn't
it.
be privy to it,
exactly.
you know?
And so that's why we had discussed with Jamie on how to make it robust, where everything that they can be shared is easily accessible. And I think maybe part of it has to do with communication, because remember, y'all are industry experts. So when you start saying, I can't do this or I can't do that, I mean, we're lay people. I mean, we know a little bit about utilities. I don't know, David probably knows more, but, so when you start saying, I can't share ABC, there's might be a disconnect between that and saying that's not one of the things that we're allowed to share. So I think that could be part of it too, because we need to make sure that we're all on the same page as far as what is able to be shared and what we're going to share. So anything that is legally able to be shared, we need to share.
I mean, Paul, what Mike's saying, I mean, you in agreement with that?
Well, if I could address, Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead.
if I could address Mr. Ford's comment, because I know it's directed at me. My take on this thing has always been, we will share everything we can to make sure projects are completed and done, and the county gets the information they need. The only statement I've ever made is I will not condone sharing our entire geo database, which is everything that we have in utilities. That's the only thing. I've always said we will support all reports, anything that's run, anything, different sections that the county needs to be able to do their development. The only statement I've ever made is I do not support sharing our geo database, which is everything in our system. That's the only comment I've ever made.
And to
And I
that
don't think we
point,
want your geodata.
and to that point, there's some things in the geodatabase that you legally cannot share, and that's the reason for the statement. So, so again, remember, we're more of a lay people on that. So I understand exactly, because we can't share every locate there, but definitely we want to be on the same page. That anything legal to share, we want to share 100% of that those items,
Yeah.
which is, I think, going to be 99% of what she does, or what Edmund Jones does.
I think a lot of that data is going to be in the choke point.
Exactly.
We need
And
more
that's the big one.
Capacity of Bell Road, what are the issues? How can we help fix those issues? Not anything beyond that. So I think the choke point report should answer a lot of those questions.
To me, that's the most important part of the whole master plan. Where's the problems? What, and the sheets to fix them that we can turn in for grant funding. Those two things are the biggest part of it.
I think we're all saying the same thing.
I think so too. I think sometimes it's in the communication process. Now, we're new to this process, so that's part of it too. Jamie, where are we at? Now, you said April. Is it? I hear April.
I think I need a my brain to digest that whole conversation that just happened for a little while longer, but it sounds like we've come to a general agreement on how we're going to share data, which is extremely important. And so that means the data sharing can commence. And so I have, as I said, shared some new file sharing structure with the city staff this morning, and we will evaluate where we're at with everything that we've gathered, and I can give you an actual date next time I am in front of you, if that works. A date when we expect
Date,
X,
you mean-
Y, and Z to happen, and then you can hold me to that date, and I will regret that, but I'm just kidding.
Yes, you will. You definitely will.
Any information that you or the city may need relevant to, you know, Chad being the county engineer today, could be another one 10 years from now, whoever. But whoever that county engineer is, in this design, in this format, that, you know, reach out and keep them involved and get their input, and then, you know, y'all's group, you know, can work together with them, and then whoever shows up as our county engineer or the city engineer, you know, in the future. You know, at least we got a plan that we can continue to go forward. Just keep the ball rolling. I think that's all everybody's asking, you know, to get these kinks out. I think I'm with, Mr. Sampson. I think it should be done.
Sooner's better.
Yes, sir. I appreciate tonight's discussion, the direction that I've been given, and I will give you a more robust update next time, now that I have such clear direction. Thank you so much.
So what is your clear direction? Well, I would
That's a good.
My clear direction is I will follow up with Mr. Dial after the meeting to ensure that we both heard the same direction. But that we are comfortable sharing the data that we are legally allowed to share. And it's just a matter of putting together a package that has pulled out the data we are allowed to share and then sharing it with our partners. I'll need to work with Mr. Dial and with his staff to parse out what we are and are not allowed to share, and then we can provide that to the county to be used by a very specific, i.e. one set of people to provide technical evaluation on the products that we develop. So, and we'll work out whether that's a matter of physically giving a copy of it versus giving them a login internally, which one of those presents less risk to someone else gaining access, because, you know, if we give it to you, then there's two places they could hack versus you just coming in to the city system with a login. So we'll evaluate the safest way to do that, and we will give you everything that we legally can in a way that makes sense. Does that
So
sound Paul?
that part.
So basically, you heard the same thing I heard.
I
That's
think I did.
That anything legally
Yes,
that you can give us in the Mr. Dial case.
yes, yes. Mr. Dial, is that all right? Did I say that okay?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, great. I'll work with city and county staff and we will share the data as directed by the committee. Okay,
whatever we can legally share.
yes.
Yes.
Okay, I think I'm ready to move on to the next item. If
We're
everyone.
waiting on you.
Okay, excellent. If staff would mind pulling up, my next item is a presentation. So at the last meeting, the discussion of the water main routing study that we completed came up, and that discussion moved very quickly into direction to put together a scope and fee to actually design that water main. And then we received some follow-up feedback from stakeholders and members of the public that they felt they didn't have enough information on how we got to that point. That's the wrong presentation. It's the other one that was part of the backup, the packet that was posted. The water main routing study presentation.
One moment, please.
So the feedback we received is that we had never presented the findings of the study to the full committee. and the public felt they didn't have enough information. There might have been some misunderstandings. And so my goal with the presentation I'm about to give is to go through what the water main routing study entailed, the various alternatives to achieve the goal of that study, and then what our recommended route was, so that we can hopefully receive guidance to move forward in one way or another.
Is it that one?
In the agenda packet,
It's got like a blue and orange
you
color.
scroll down maybe. There you go, that works. Okay, so the water main route study, if you'll go ahead and scroll down to the next slide, the objective of the study, based on discussions with the County Economic Development Group and the folks who are very familiar with the projected development at the North Florida Mega Industrial Park, we decided a conservative estimate of the water demand is 4 million gallons per day. And so the goal of the project was to evaluate route alternatives for water piping, which we determined would be best served through a 24-inch diameter water main, and to develop a hydraulic model to analyze 2 of these selected alternatives that we find, and then to develop cost estimates for the recommended routes. The map you're looking at here is the build-out rendering map that is on the website for the North Florida Mega Industrial Park that was developed by Weyerhaeuser and their engineering firm. You go ahead and scroll down to the next slide. We used a significant number of criteria to evaluate and identify route alternatives based on our discussions again with city and county staff, and based on good engineering know-how. And came up with this list here. It's not exhaustive, but these are the highlights. We of course looked at land boundaries of who owns which property, the wetland locations, as Dr. Barrett mentioned. There are wetlands out in this area, pretty significant wetlands. We also looked at existing infrastructure, how to access not only that infrastructure, but also the industrial park and the surrounding properties. We looked at the proposed layout, which you can kind of see here superimposed on the map of the industrial park. Those, typical topography, soil type, the length of the pipe, the constraints with constructing that pipe, and our specific stated goal was to initially get water to the north side of the mega industrial park, because that is where it is anticipated that development will occur first. As we've discussed, the residential developments that are likely coming in with the zoning changes, and any proposed businesses would likely come in off of US 90 first. And so the highest goal was to get water to the north side of the industrial park first. So I'm going to go through the 6 alternatives that we developed first to kind of show you the different routes we evaluated to get there, and then what our recommendations were. So go ahead and scroll down to alternate 1. It's a little bit hard to see here. Thank you. You can kind of see it in red. So alternate 1 comes directly from the high service pump station at the Price Creek Water Treatment Plant, goes up north along Timberwolf to US 90, and then goes all the way over to Tire Road. The challenges to this route are the potential conflicts within the site of the treatment plant. There's a lot of piping there already, as well as a pretty congested right-of-way on US 90 and Timberwolf with existing utilities. Just a little bit of other information, typical spine sand out there, may require directional drilling. And so that's, I think, kind of in response to one of the items that Dr. Barrett mentioned in his public comment was the concern over the wetlands. And I would like to point out that any wetlands encountered during these routes, we would drill under them. There is a specific permitting process through the Water Management District for drilling under wetlands, which therefore minimizes the impact to those environmental pieces. This is a relatively long route, almost 16,000 linear feet. But the benefit is the piping is exclusively within the right-of-way of either the city, the county, or DOT. Go ahead and scroll down to the second alternative. So the color doesn't come across super well on the big screen. I apologize, but it's kind of like a mustardy yellow, it looks like, a whole grain mustard. This one comes off of an existing 30-inch pipe that's actually south of the Price Creek Water Treatment Plant. And so there's already a significant amount of supply coming that way. It would then go up along a timber road parallel to the well field of the city, and then it would enter the mega industrial park kind of roughly in the middle through one of their proposed parking lots. This one is not exclusively in right of way. It does include going along dirt roads within water district and Weyerhaeuser property. However, it does minimize the wetlands that are crossed through the construction, and so you could do it through open cut trenches, which typically is a slightly less expensive construction method as opposed to drilling under the wet areas. And this one's a little bit shorter. It's just shy of 10,000 linear feet. Go ahead and scroll down to alternate 3. So this one also stays to the south and comes off of that 30-inch pipe. Instead of coming up and paralleling the well field, this follows a timber road at the south end of the Water Management District property. It's not really the south end of their property. They own a lot of property that continues much further south, but kind of in this area, this parcel is what I'm referencing. And then again, we come up through, it's references Road 363. I don't think anyone called it that, but it's one of the timber roads that goes through the district property. This also would connect to the mega industrial park sort of through that proposed parking area right in the middle. I mean, coming in the middle, the benefit is you have easy access from both the north and the south with just a little bit of an extension of infrastructure, as opposed to coming in on one end or the other. This one has the most variable topography. We see a relief change of about 14 feet as we go along, which adds construction costs because, I mean, the good thing with a water main is, you know, you don't have to keep a certain slope per se the whole time. It's a pressurized pipe, but it still does make either add to your length of pipe by going up and down, or you increase your construction cost by having to dig deeper to have a straight pipe. Again, this one does have the option to open cut, which helps save a little money because we're avoiding the wetlands. And it's kind of a medium length pipe, if you will, compared to the other alternatives at just shy of 12,000 linear feet. So we're halfway. That's the first 3 alternatives. We have 3 more that we looked at. Alternate 4, instead of coming off of that 30-inch pipe like the last 2 we looked at, this one again comes right off of the high service pump station at the plant, parallels the well fields, and again, splits the difference, comes in the middle of the industrial park. This one's relatively short. It's a little bit shorter than the last one at 9,800 linear feet, and again, avoids wetlands, and we're staying on the already existing timber roads. Not right of way though. We are cutting through Water Management District property. And again, there's the potential for some conflicts at the plant site because of all the piping that already exists out there. So that's a little bit of a challenge. This one's relatively straightforward. And we did like this alternative a lot. I do want to say it was one of our top 3. But again, I'd like to restate that one of the primary goals was to get water to the north end of the park first. And by coming in the middle here, you still have to add more piping to get it to the north end. Go ahead to alternative 5. And this is actually 5A and 5B that you can see in yellow. This one comes right off of the high service pump station, goes north along Timberwolf, and then cuts across one of the timber roads on the Water Management District property to the edge of the mega industrial park. Now, again, one of our stated goals to this report was to identify getting water from the plant to the park, not necessarily piping it through the park. And that's why we broke this into 5A and 5B. 5A gets us to the edge of the park, the boundary, and it's the shortest route if you do it that way. It's only 5,800 linear feet, so it's relatively inexpensive. Relatively short, I should say, which leads to inexpensive. Does cross at least one wetland that we know of, but again, we would propose drilling underneath that wetland. And if we stop at the park boundary, we're mostly in the right of way with just a little bit of coordination with the Water Management District. Now, we proposed 5B as well because not only did we want to get water to the residential area, which is kind of the northwest corner of that, you know, sort of peninsula of property, but we also know there are businesses that are looking to come in off of US 90. So we wanted to be able to provide water to those businesses, and by coming up through the proposed roadway within the industrial park and then connecting with the existing water main on US 90, you create a looped system which helps protect the water quality. The water's not just sitting in the pipe for a long time if it's not being pulled off the end of the line. If you loop it, it's continuously running through and it keeps the water fresh all the time. And again, that increases the potential for future connectivity. You could run it south along the loop road within the industrial park. And so Once you add on 5B, which is the dashed line within the park, you get to 13,300 linear feet, and you have additional stakeholders you need to work with. First and foremost, Weyerhaeuser, the landowner, but also we believe the county intends to own the road within the park eventually. We don't know when that road is to be constructed. And this proposal and this alternative follows the proposed road, but that road doesn't exist and there is not a plan to construct it yet. So there's, again, it was broken into A and B because there's additional challenges to the B side because it's still following something that, again, doesn't exist, hasn't been designed. So that's 5A and 5B. And then if you scroll down, our last alternate we looked at was 6. And this one is also kind of hard to see. It's pink down there at the bottom. This comes off of the 30-inch pipe. Thank you for printing that out. It follows Timber Road down the south end of that parcel and then connects to the North Florida Mega Industrial Park at the south end. It's a relatively short pipeline. We're avoiding wetlands for the most part with a couple of minor ditch crossings. Does have a little bit of variable topography, but it's another relatively straightforward construction job. The only problem is it comes in at the south end, which our goal was to get water to the north end. We just wanted to show that we did evaluate kind of bringing water into the park in multiple places because it gives you more flexibility and it gives you more options to look at. And so that was all 6 of the alternatives that we identified as ways to get water from the plant to the park. If you go ahead and scroll down to the next slide, we presented those alternatives to city staff. We had a workshop where we went through all of the pros and cons, potential challenges. We created a scoring system matrix to kind of look at all of those items that we discussed in the beginning that went into the evaluation, and we recommended one of these 2 alternatives. And so we modeled these 2 as our selected alternatives. One, again, goes up north along Timberwolf, along US 90, to that first west entrance to the North Florida Mega Industrial Park, which allows us to serve the residential area as well as the businesses we believe where they'll come in first. Whereas 5A and 5B is a little bit shorter. It still serves the same area, but we avoid the congested right-of-way along US 90, which there's already, I believe, 4 different utilities running along that right-of-way, and so we likely would not be able to actually construct in the DOT right-of-way. We would have to get a new easement south of that from Weyerhaeuser. So in the end, we modeled both alternatives. They both had very, very similar results with regard to their impact on the city system, so it's relatively de minimis, the difference. And we ended up recommending alternative 5A/B. We believe that 5A should be sort of the first phase of this, get water to the park while development in the park is still being worked out. And then once the development is a little bit more locked in, we know where the road is going to go, we know where the businesses are going to go, we can then coordinate with that design and construction at the same time to do phase 2, which would be 5B. That also helps you split up the cost over multiple budget years. You know, at the last meeting, we discussed developing a proposal for the whole thing. However, while A is relatively straightforward, B has more nuance and more stakeholders that we would like to coordinate with. So it would make the most sense to kind of do it in 2 phases and give us more time to coordinate within the park. The costs you see presented here, they're based in 2020 dollars, but this is a planning level cost estimate that we performed with limited information and no survey. And so we provide kind of a minus 30% plus 50% for the cost, which is that range of numbers that you see there. And so we have 5A on its own, about $2.5 million, and then 5A and B together, about $5.5 million. But that's the kind of summary of how we developed those alternatives, what criteria we evaluated to weigh them against each other. And I hope that makes it a little more clear why we leaned towards 1 and 5A and 5B. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Yeah.
So with either one of these, they go through the area that Dr. Barrett referenced. what would the impact be to that wetland that's there at the bottom? If we do that directional drilling, how would that impact?
So I'd like to first say that the wetlands you see on the screen here in the hatched blue, those are provided by the National Wetlands Inventory. It's a national database that combines multiple data sources into a map that's supposed to be easily accessible by the public, right? So you get kind of a high level view of where wetlands may be, but that data still does need to be ground truth. And I do believe the wetland that we see these pipelines crossing is there. I just think the extent of it needs to be verified. We would need to do wetland delineation. So that field work does need to be completed. That being said, whatever wetland crossing we do, we would recommend directional drilling underneath the wetland. Typically, wetlands are kept wet based on the soil layer beneath them, right? It's normally like a clay layer that helps the water pond up. And so typically you would recommend drilling kind of below that base layer of the wetland. You also build in, when you directionally drill something, the pressure builds in the hole and it can sometimes kind of pop out the top. It's called frack out, right? And we have engineering methods to prevent that by building in sort of release valves, which helps to prevent that drilling fluid from getting into and contaminating the wetland. As an example, Jones Edmonds, we just completed a project, or we're in the middle of a project for GRU, putting in a new force main on the east side of Gainesville that passes by significant wetlands and creek systems. We're drilling under all of it. We designed it to have these release valves to prevent the drilling fluid from contaminating the wetland. And it was all permitted through DEP and the water. I think it was just DEP, not the Water Management District. But it was all permitted to protect those wetlands and to minimize the impacts. And so with regard to the environmental concern is we would do everything in our power to minimize the wetland impacts within the letter of the law and the permits that are required. And with regard to the flooding that goes on in this area, the pipeline would inevitably be underground and there would be no new impervious, soil that doesn't drain created through the construction of this project. We actually want it to be well draining soils around it. And so we would not anticipate this project contributing to any flooding. And during construction, if there's a concern of the access to college being blocked off, we would of course do maintenance of traffic to route traffic around where we are constructing within the right of way of the road. And if the road did need to be closed for any period of time, we can also conduct construction exclusively at night or when school is not in session so that we don't prevent access to students or staff of the college. And again, there would be erosion and sedimentation control measures put in place to prevent any off-site impacts from our construction to the neighboring properties. Those are all standard construction procedures that we would keep in place. And the city and county staff are both very familiar with that with the projects that y'all run. And so this project should not have a measurable impact on the comings and goings or the flooding that's going on at the college. But we could also certainly do a watershed management kind of analysis as a separate task to evaluate kind of where that flooding's come from and make some recommendations. We do these sort of watershed management studies often. It's a big part of what our water resource group does to kind of evaluate where stormwater is going, why it's flooding where it is, and what are some prospective improvements that could be done to reduce that impact in the future. But those impacts would not be caused by this project. This project should not have any negative impact in that regard.
Flooding aspect.
Correct.
Last,
The wetland that they're speaking about during this route, it actually crosses the Swanee River. It crosses the right of way. There's already a 12-inch line that goes through this. It goes into the other side into the college property, which is a wetland area that drains into their main ditch that goes to their pond. So there's already a 12-inch line going through this, under this wetland. It goes around behind the college's library. Instead, with this line's proposed, instead of following the property of the library around the Timberwolf, it goes straight up our right of way where our private road is, the Timberwolf.
So the blue line is the line you're referencing to the left of it.
If you, this right here.
The blue is
what
existing
there.
water main.
This blue line here is a 12-inch line.
Okay,
And it comes up here and it's actually what feeds the college from this side. And then the college also gets a feed from the other side off of, academic.
and so the new line's to the west of that, or to the east of it, how far
Yes.
to the east?
This would, be east of that in our right of way. This would be the wetland in question. This is Swanee River property out here where this wetland forms. And then it crosses under our right of way. And I believe the college owns this right here where the wetland basin is. And then it travels from there to their, canal system or ditch system and then it goes down to their pond.
And we do a water, a wetland study previously, when we did the 12-inch pipe, and is it pretty accurate to what's depicted here?
All of that was done probably
2006, 5.
back to 2000.
Was that board or was it Doug originally?
So the 12-inch right now, Mike, I think is what you said, 12-inch exists behind the library as we speak right now, correct? And just like it's showing here, the boom little job, Mike, it just went up.
The blue piping in that picture is
Gotcha.
existing water line. It goes up, it actually borders that library on two sides. Borders on the east side and on the north side.
Okay, what size is it? It loops around the end of the airport,
It's 12-inch.
12-inch all the way? I got you.
Now with that, Jamie, you mentioned a secondary watershed study.
That would not be,
No, it would be separate from this,
Correct.
but if they're having a flooding issue, that might be something that there's grants available to do. I mean, there's a lot of watershed studies, because maybe there's another way to mitigate that, because it wouldn't be caused by this activity.
certainly, yes. There are grants out there with the American Rescue Plan Act funding that's coming our way, that they're specifically looking for projects that address resiliency and equity. And with this, with Columbia County in general being a rural area of opportunity and a low-income fiscally constrained community, then we would absolutely qualify for the equity-based grants. And then flooding or flooding protection projects also qualify under resiliency. As an example, they offer, when the notice of funding opportunity is released, which it has not been yet, they will be offering planning grants, which would be for a study, and they'll have construction grants. And so the county and or the city and or the college, it's a public college, correct, could apply for these grants. And then you could look into hiring the engineering firm, possibly me, to do that study for you. But no, that is something that's very common to do these sort of watershed analyses. The Water Management District may actually also have some information because they own this property. They've owned it for a long time. And because this area feeds into the lower Santa Fe and Ichetucknee minimum flow and level, they may have actually already done some surface water studies. And so it would definitely be worth staff reaching out to the Water Management District. Amy Brown was the point of contact. Sorry, Amy, for calling you out if you're listening, but she was the head of the water supply group. And so if not her, it would be John Good, who was over MFLs, but he's leaving. So maybe Sean King now is over MFLs. And so maybe Sean would be a good one to reach out to and see if they have any data. And you could certainly start there, and it might have identified some projects. And if there are not projects identified to address flooding in a specific spot, you could certainly commission a new study that's a little bit more zoomed in, if you will, and try to figure out some options.
Yeah, I think I would be for a partnership to look into that, if the county and the college wanted to do that together. I think that would definitely be something that we could look into. I think they're doing the MFLs on the Ichetucknee and the lower Santa Fe right now.
Yes.
So it may be something they have already done. There was so much information. I saw them at the County Economic Development Office a couple months ago. It seems like they had tons of information there
Yeah.
on this area. So that's good information. I do think the way you laid it out in the two segments, in my opinion, makes the most sense. I do think that residential segment, if we had a water line there today, we could have permits to build houses there. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind. Now, could that change tomorrow? Sure it could, but I think I think doing the two parts and then being able to loop back too, that solves a lot of issues with that other piece as well.
Paul, when the 12-inch gets to 90, you know, there at the entrance, and it turns, goes back toward the prison, what size is that? Because that's the one that you have issues with, right? That's bad.
The issue that we have is with the, force main.
Force main, I'm sorry. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
I do have a question on 5B.
Yes, sir.
The other day we were talking with Paul, and he talked about running water lines parallel to train tracks. Do you have any concerns with that link, water line paralleling the rail? I know this is out of the blue and I apologize.
No, it's okay. In my experience, permits that go under or parallel to railroads can be challenging. But I've only worked on ones that go under, not ones that go parallel. So I would need to check with someone who has more experience and get back. Who is the owner of that railroad? Do we know?
We're building it, it'll be a county road.
So it'll be a county railroad. Oh, interesting. Okay. I've not worked on a publicly owned railroad before. Normally it's, CSX or whoever.
I just know it was a concern of Paul's and I just want to make sure we address it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speculate in public, but I imagine that there may be additional structural components to constructing a pipeline parallel to a railroad because of the additional kind of force and vibrations that come down that way. But I would have to check and get someone who knows more than me, which we have a lot of those people at Jones Evans. And I could have one of them speak to that for you next.
That might be another reason to do 5A and not 5B at this time.
Yeah, I just think that there are a lot of question marks with 5B, and I think that the landowner would prefer to sit down with us, the city and the county, to kind of talk about the logistics and what's currently planned versus what's coming. And then also from a construction perspective, it might make sense to design 5B, but not construct it until they are constructing the road or until they're constructing the residential area and the businesses, so that the boundaries of that construction are more locked in and we can be more cohesive with the kind of like the overall plan. Because that road is projected to go where it looks now, but if that changes, we don't want to go back and redesign the pipeline. So it would make much more sense to kind of do that together and then hand it over to one contractor to do the whole shebang, instead of we build the pipe and they build the road and we try to match up. So I just think there's more logistics within the park, and the railroad as an option. I mean, maybe it's even a little bit different than what we're looking at here. Whereas the 5A portion is pretty straightforward. We've proactively reached out to the Water Management District and discussed the potential route with them, and they are not locked in, but they are tentatively comfortable with the route that we have decided on. And of course, we would have to do survey and work out easements and all that.
Not to cut you off, but when you say the site you decided on,
The recommended route that the
The alternate.
committee gave me direction to move forward with the last meeting. So 5A.
Okay.
That's what I showed Water Management District, and their only concern was that the timber roads when we go under the road, that they be constructed back to a standard that can handle the timber trucks and things like that, which is completely reasonable. And so they highlighted sort of the areas where they'd want construction to be careful.
So what is your timeline on permitting and engineering this, 5A?
We could, the design of 5A would be maybe 6 months. So it wouldn't be that bad. It's pretty straightforward. We've already done the preliminary work. I talked to a surveyor who has a lead time of only 3 weeks right now. So we got a quote from them and they would be ready to mobilize within 3 weeks. And so if that was locked in, we could move forward with that. Permitting, as long as we drill under wetlands and do the wetland delineation and minimize our impacts within the permit requirement, that should also be relatively straightforward. They have 30 days to review the permit. If there's any requests for information, it takes up to 60 or 90 days. So I think that design and permitting could be done in 6 months. Because we did this preliminary study, we're sitting pretty. We have a good amount of information to provide to the permitting agencies, and we just need to ground truth a lot of it.
You're saying that once you do the design and permitting, the construction probably take place, start within 3 weeks?
No, the survey would mobilize within 3 weeks. Yeah, I think construction timeline's a little bit more uncertain because I don't know what the status of kind of the materials market will be in.
My question would be, what would be the timeline would be to get it ready to go out?
Oh, to go out to bid 6 months from a notice to proceed. I would feel comfortable with that.
Surveying and all?
Permitting and all.
I can't say for sure that the permit will be issued, but I can say that it will be submitted and under review and hopefully issued within that 6-month timeframe. The
So
water.
let's call it a year. Let's
But,
call it a year.
I mean, to get out to bid, I really don't think 6 to 9 months at most.
We're not
And
gonna
then
bid nothing when you get permits.
it's, well, that's why I just said 6 to 9 then, but I mean, like, from a design and permit submittal perspective, it's straightforward, and I think that as long as we design it to minimize the wetland impacts, it would just be a general permit, which is a 30-day issuance, as long as there's no questions, and we would coordinate with district staff to minimize, if not eliminate, questions prior to submittal. So I feel pretty comfortable getting 5A forward. It's 5B is the bigger question mark, again, because there's also a big old wetland we're trying to go around. And if that road moves and we have wetland impacts, then you deal with a much bigger permit that takes a lot longer. But we don't even have like jurisdictional wetlands right here. Like, I'm not worried about a core permit. I'm not really worried about a 404. I can't say in public that it's a no, it's not going to be needed, but I'm pretty confident, and I've talked to my environmental person, that we don't need these like federal permits or anything. It's pretty straightforward 5A. 5B, I don't know.
Would you want 5B designed before you start at 5A, or you think it's would be okay to run 5A and then do 5B at a later date?
I think it would be okay to run 5A first, especially because this residential development might be bigger than they're projecting here. And then who knows if they'll want us to run a 24-inch pipe through their community, or if they just want to tap it out there and then we have to go around them. Also, that road might move to accommodate bigger commercial businesses. We may need to address the wetland situation that's within the park right there. So, I mean, I think it's a priority to get water to the park so that those developers can come in and see, great, there's a tap right there, I just need to go get it. Whereas if it's all the way down, you know, at US 90, we don't have enough supply to feed what we expect to come in the long term. And they don't want to have to run 6,000 linear feet of pipe to get to a better connection point. So I think 5A opens the door for the businesses, and then 5B is kind of what is the home run to loop the system and extend that availability through the park. Does that sound about right, Paul?
Yeah, I do have a question, Jamie. Where are you running the pipe around the right-of-way for the airport, for the runway?
Yes, sir.
Is there anything that needs to be taken into consideration if there was a runway expansion as it relates to utilities being in that flight path or that part that's managed or maintained? Is anyone looked at that? That's been a discussion for years about it, maybe a future expansion, especially considering potential growth at the airport.
Sure. Would any potential expansion eliminate Timberwolf, or would it be on just the other side of Timberwolf?
I can't speak to that, but there have been some discussion on that, yes.
In my opinion, there is not a big concern because it's an underground utility. The only concern that comes to mind would be maintenance and just having access if there was an issue with the pipe underneath a future runway. But that is something I think if the runway expanded, you would have that built into an operations plan and or an agreement between the city, county, and the airport operator that, you know, you'll work to schedule around whatever issues. If there's an emergency, here's how you'll deal with it, et cetera. But from just the logistics of the pipe being under the runway, I don't anticipate concerns. We may bring that up during design and put it a little deeper, but I'm not an airport person or a train person.
Right, maybe that's something to talk to the feds about and see if that's some part of a requirement.
Yeah, I can definitely look into that some more and then come back with those answers. And that would also come up in the first phase of design, you know, kickoff meeting. We want to talk about those concerns. So.
Does anybody know, do we own county possessed Tower Road?
We maintain it. Yes.
Our road's county road.
This is county road. What was the cost of Alternative 6?
We only did cost estimates for the two modeled alternatives, 1 and the 5A/5B. And that's to do 1 was 6.3 million. I mean, the costs are right there. I don't know if you can
Right.
see them very well. And then 5A was 2.5, and then the B extension was 3 million. So 5A and B together was slightly less expensive than 1.
So I'll just ask the board professionals here, on the alternate 6, where it doesn't basically impact no wetland.
Would you mind scrolling back up to alternate 6? Yeah, there you go.
And I'm pretty sure I'm right, but 2/3 of the way down, 3/4 of the way down, that dirt road that I'm seeing there, that is Tire Road, correct? Glenn, do you mind going up there and pointing out Tire Road? Put you on the spot,
It's like, oh, yeah.
just for the public.
This is Tire Road.
And that's not Tire Road.
And this is the railroad.
Okay.
This
Is
is
it?
Tire Road. It
That's
looks
Tire
like
Road.
this is
What's
west
the
end.
alternate road right here to the left there? That's where I'm kind of confused, right? Straight down.
Oh, wait,
Where your
wow.
finger was.
I'm
Go
sorry.
to the left. Okay, down, straight down.
That's 363.
That's actually a
So that's a private road inside the development then.
That, it's water management.
Water management.
district.
Water management.
Water Management District.
Yeah.
Okay,
Forest Road.
that's Forest Road, right?
Mm-hmm.
Paul, I mean, I gotta ask a question. It looks like that would be inexpensive to get to that. I mean, Swanee River Water Management owning that road. Would that not be the quickest and most undirected, I mean, least obstructions to get back out to 90, get left, right? Does that make sense, or?
I mean, if you're looking at the ultimate thing was to get water to the park as quick as possible and stay up towards the north side. So, that's the reason we didn't actually go with that.
Mhm.
Now,
I mean-
to answer your question, yes, probably if you ran that route, eventually, yes, then you could run it back up north, but then you're doubling your cost on that.
Mhm. Well, I'm just thinking in my mind, because I know these guys always talk, and I know directional drilling is very expensive. And then this seems like when you get into under these wetlands, of course, Jamie goes through it all the time, but it just seems like a very, very expensive, avenue to go down. I don't know, and Glenn, on this area here where it jumps down, we'll say on what would that be, the west end, the east end, or the west end? What, is that any future part of the the mega site, Glenn, or is everything pretty well from that point over? There won't be no more future development over on this side.
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying.
Okay, see can tell him to scroll that picture up where Fred ain't blocking with his head. Don't, okay,
So you see where the pink line kind of dead ends?
correct.
That is in the industrial.
You're fine. No,
So it is in the industrial park. The industrial park kind of has that
Have
link
white-
there.
You have some white markers showing potential square footage
okay,
for developments.
okay.
So yeah, that eventually, hopefully,
Because ultimately, Paul, I mean, to get the flow, we've got to get the big line up there to 90 naturally to put all the flow back and forth. Over the issue you do right now.
What do they have to get to 90 or just to the park?
Well,
Because Jamie brought up the issue a while ago, if you get access to the park, you can break it down from there to different size lines.
Yeah, I think the ideal would be to get the big line to the park and then to have one big loop through the park
Right.
on that kind of loop road that's being developed. And then from there, you would have different distribution lines branching off to the various customers or sections of the park. But you need the big one to get that, large demand, the 4 million, and then you would size the rest accordingly as the businesses move in. And then, you can figure out kind of who's paying for what at that point. But getting the big line to at least the boundary is key. And then you coordinate with developers, city, county, landowner, et cetera, from there.
does anybody know approximately how far that is from the pink line that I'm alluding to there behind Fred, back up to 90, how far that is? Was it, Mike, is it a mile, 2 miles?
Probably 3 miles.
3 miles.
Yeah, the pink is 8,800 linear feet. And I mean, there's a scale bar there too. So if I had to guess, I'd say it's 9 to 10,000 linear feet. So that's 2 miles, sorry, 2 miles, give or take.
That's probably right.
Now, going forward, depending on where the development is in the system, we may need multiple lines anyways.
Mhm.
So we may need that line, just like we need the other line. I think the point about where the development's likely to happen first is the real question. I think it's gonna be the north side. Isn't that what we're looking at? Kinda?
We're trying very hard to locate most of the industries as close to 90 as possible, so we don't have to build roads.
Exactly. So that's the other thought with the 5 and 5A is that gets us close to 90 where the development's gonna be initially. So if we ended up down here on the south side and then we get development up at the north side, now we got a real expensive jump to making that couple of miles.
And you'll have quite a few wetlands.
Well, yeah, there's definitely gonna be wetlands, but then that means too, the roads are gonna need to be in place or going into place so we can go along them to get up there. That could complicate it.
Well, you know, again, like David said, we're trying to put everything up front there, but, you know, probably 7 years ago, the Board of County Commissioners committed to the cost of the infrastructure going out the cost of the road going into that.
That's right. But not the time.
Before my time, you know, but that's another great monster sitting on the shoulder. Yeah.
And that's why I don't think you wanna go south first.
Say again?
That's why I don't think you wanna go south first, because you don't need the roads down there.
I think the best plan would be, you was concerned about the water line out here, go ahead and get it permitted and engineered in place. And I would concentrate my revenue right now on Bell Road, fix the problem at Bell Road, so I could tie in the north side of Lake City, where you have existing customers right now that could tie onto that system. And you would be creating revenue immediately.
And that's why
That's an excellent point.
that's what I was asking Jamie about the permitting aspect of it, because everybody in this room knows, you know, we gotta fund it, we gotta figure out how to fund each and every one of these options. But, I agree, you know, we got people knocking on the door, but, you know, until the zinc dries, it's not a customer. I'd rather be sitting in the work go, you know, I just gotta rely on the professionals, which one's the best. I kind of swaying toward B myself. I want the least impact on all the neighbors, of course, wetlands inclusive. But, as we move forward with this, I'm all for, we'll figure out how we, get it designed, what have you. But
Well, it sounds like to me the time is involved in engineering and permitting. So if you engineer and permit it, you could be sitting on ready to run a line at any point. And not spending money right now, you could apply for maybe some grant money to do this.
correct.
And if you're gonna use money you have available right now, spend it where you got customers ready to connect. I mean, you've got the whole north side of Lake City on failing septic tanks right now that you could get grant money to do away with those septic tanks and tie those customers to sewer. And you got a customer base sitting there waiting.
Similar to the one, I guess, that Paul and then we're doing the 75, y'all doing the 75%. That's environmental. And I know that's a big push for DEP, and we talked about that. The presentations that Paul and Steve and Mike and that's made relevant to the Bell Road thing coming this way. I know we're getting off track on Bell Road, but it's a very good point. That I'm ready to collectively as a group, you know, let's figure which route we're gonna go here, but we still don't have a customer on the hook.
That's right.
Before I spend $4 or $5 million of taxpayers' dollars out, you know, put the water line, I like to know the path that it's gonna take. But when we're getting down to the final stretch of this, I would like people like Dr. Baird, HACO, people like that to be involved, because the point Glenn brought up, That's a very valid point. I didn't even think about it. And, I'm not saying it's gonna happen, but
We
the,
can also include a public outreach component to the professional services scope and fee. I mean, I agree with Mr. Ford's comments that if we could at least get it designed and permitted, then you can take a second, apply for grants. You can have, during the design process, public outreach where you have a public workshop, discuss kind of where you're at, what you found when you surveyed, do the wetland delineation first, and make sure we clearly identify where those boundaries are and kind of explain what the permitting process entails and just kind of go through what the impacts of construction would be. We could bring one of our construction professionals out who oversee these types of projects and they can try to talk about those concerns too. That's definitely something we can include and something we do all the time. So. Yeah.
In the meantime, give Steve, figure out how to work on the gas, try to get gas out there, try to get some money for that. I mean, you know, we have other things besides water out there we're trying to have.
Dave wants very
We
two
need to have a plan in place. But if we're gonna, like I say, if we're gonna spend money right now, we can spend money where we have customers ready to hook up. And where there's grant money readily available.
Well, I think with this, if we go forward on the planning piece, that definitely could be covered by some of those grants you mentioned with the ARPA and the different ones. So I think the piece to get it ready to construct, we can move forward on. And that way, when the, you know, at that point, when we know there's a customer, don't then have a 6-month lead time to get there. So we can cut that time down to 6 to 9 months, and that way you get something signed and say, oh, the plan's already there. I think that's the key thing. So if we could pursue a grant for the planning piece through that, that would be outstanding to get the design and permitting in place.
A grant for
Are we
the
to
design
that
permitting of the 5A
of the
water.
5A?
Okay.
I think that's the direction.
Yeah, I don't know if there's gonna be a grant available for that.
So what we know is, if a company were to walk in tomorrow and say, yes, I'm signing on the dotted line, I want to, it's gonna take them at least 12 months.
That's what I'm saying. That gives us,
We're not.
still, we're ready to go with place. With our
You got
permitting and all.
plenty of time if the design is done and ready to go out to bid and construction along the same timeline that the company is actually building.
That's my point. They're gonna have to have a build out.
But Warner,
We
who was
can
ready
build
to
out,
day
but-
one, took 12 months.
But the design is where we always run into,
correct.
and the permitting is where we always run into this big timeline.
Mr. Chair, if I may, with my experience in going after grant funding, it is a little bit easier to get funding for construction-ready projects than it is for design and permitting projects. Even though the ARPA funding will be there, the notice of funding opportunity has not been released yet. So we don't know when that grant application process will open, just that they're trying to allocate the money by September of next year. So kind of any time in the next year that's going to pop. But in my opinion, I would recommend moving forward with the design and permitting with existing funding, existing budget, and then take that design and go out for construction dollars. And then you're much more competitive because it's already ready to go. They love shovel-ready projects, especially ones that can be completed in less than a year, which this one could be. And so, my 2 cents.
We're positioning for success, future success.
Yes,
That's
sir.
what we're doing.
I agree with Jamie. If you get the design done and the permit and you've got a shovel-ready job, there's money out there available for that job.
Yes, sir.
But you have to have it shovel-ready.
At least 90% they'd like to see.
And of course, I'm working off the way engineering companies do, as far as the percentage cost. 5A, 5B, you're talking about 5.4, possibly 3.8, possibly 8. So split it in the middle. You're talking about $3.8 million. So am I correct to say that, and I'm not putting you on the spot, I like to do this, but my point is that all engineers like to get that grand 10%.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm sitting there saying is that you're talking about $380,000 for design and permitting. As an average. So my point is that not worrying about grants, however we decide to finance that, you got an upfront cost $300,000. Design cost. 9 months later, it's sitting in the books, somebody done be rolled. What's it happen? Of course, one of the things that happen over in the county. Well, we don't want to do this before we know what grant, but that's your investment. That's your community.
Well, and most grants have matching, you have to matching funds anyway, so that could be your match.
Exactly.
Correct.
Mhm.
Correct.
Yep. And really, and
You think they are, anyway, you think.
I mean, and as a rural community, a rural area of opportunity, you're actually not required to have a match on most of the grants that you go after. However, it does make you more competitive because it shows you're invested in the project.
So if we proceed and pick a plan and want to go to the design phase, rough cost just south of 400,000.
That would be for 5A and B combined. I would still recommend breaking them into two
Yeah, I definitely
phases
think
because
that's
the
the
different
case,
levels of
definitely.
complexity.
Yeah, 5A, we're talking about 5A, I would
You're to
say.
the court.
Yeah. So 5A, oh God, don't put me on the spot, but
Write it down.
10% is an excellent rule of thumb, put it that way. I mean, we've already reached out to surveyor and a geotechnical firm. We've talked to the district, we've looked into it, and I believe, and I'm not the one putting the scope together, but I think the number came out to roughly 240,000 for the total professional services on 5A. And again, that includes all the subcontractors to get out, do the environmental work, the survey work, the geotech work, stuff like that. So that's the rough number. I'd have to dial it in and send Mr. Dial the official scope and fee, which is, we were just waiting for direction if we're gonna break it up or not.
Dr. Barry?
Just I know this is not unusual to speak again.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Do that. A couple things, I think the committee today brought forward that goes to my point about planning ahead. Specifically, as we talk about lines, I understand completely the issue of getting water and potentially sewer to those housing complexes. However, what Mr. Hunter brought up is a typical example of poor planning. There is a document that I have in my possession that indicates plans to extend that runway and to close Timberwolf Drive. And in these new plans that are not even been accessible yet, this new roadway from that apartment complex will add 1,400 cars onto Timberwolf. I'm not sure if we're closing Timberwolf. I'm not sure if we're closing Timberwolf so the college students can't access it and the faculty staff, or are we creating another Timberwolf that's close to the college and then it's going to create for this park? I think that's my issue today is I want to work with you. But these issues that even your own board have just brought up are very serious concerns to the college. So there are multiple plans. So thank you for listening.
Mr. Barrett, Dr. Barrett, I think that we all agree that you need to be in on the planning stages of anything that's happening around your college or our community college. And we appreciate you being at this meeting.
Thank you very much for hearing. I learned a lot today too. Thank you.
Well, the college is definitely, as he stated from the beginning, he's an integral part in the community. Of course, it reaches far apart. But, and they are nestled back here in the hole, so to speak. We gotta keep that in mind because, without them, the future looks pretty dim.
Mr. Dow, what are your thoughts on how we should proceed?
Well, I've heard stories about the airport was going to extend the runway. And I've heard several different versions of it. That one, it was not going to go outside of the fence. Then it was going to go outside of the fence, but it was only going to touch on Timberwolf. Then I've heard that they were going to close the road. Then I've heard that all was going to be scrapped. So there's a lot of different versions out there of what's going on.
Yeah, I was referring more about how do you think we should proceed with the water line though? Want to do the planning right now?
Well, at this point, if to Mr. Barrett's point, if they are planning on extending the runway, which is something Ms. Fields might want to get with Ms. Strout to find out if that is something that is going to happen, that would definitely change the running line for what we want to do. Because if that is the case, I would rather not have the line under.
Yeah, you can bring it.
I'll bring it forward. I have the full copy, full color copy, and then bring it with you.
Yeah, that would be good.
This was established in 2018.
You know, it's coming out.
Where did that come from, Dr. Barrett?
Weyerhaeuser had provided it to me, and they said that the city had been planning on doing that consultations with the city.
And Dr. Barrett is correct. The city has several times discussed extending the runway. I don't think they've ever committed to it. We've not, as a county, been approached to close Timberwolf. But there was some discussion that if the airport runway ever was extended, Timberwolf would have to be moved. And of course, you're limited because you have LKQ there. So, you know, there's only.
Well, actually, I don't want, well, actually, there's 3 routes that would run through
Right.
the warehouse property that would then route around that property in that full plan that you can't see that on that.
Who was actually talking about extending the runway? Was that warehouse we're talking
Both the
about?
city, under the 2 previous city managers, Mr. Johnson and also Greg and so forth, the warehouse. And we've had many meetings to discuss. David and I have met with the city managers, my concerns about that, and we've always kept it like, let's try to work this out so we don't have to have this. So that's one of the reasons why these issues are coming up today, is that issue.
So not to put you on the spot, Doctor, on these alternate 1, 2, 3 here I'm looking at.
This is the new one, or?
No, sir, on the airport extension, I know we're getting off the chart here, but, was in y'all's prior discussion, and I know, but it seems like this is already out there running around. But my point is to you, Dr. Barrett, was alternate 3, 1, 2, 3, was any of that, was this just their proposal, or were you an acceptance?
I was in an acceptance in it because it would literally close Timberwolf without the expansion of the housing projects of anything. I didn't know anything about that. This was strictly to get a college entranceway for our college that would run right behind where we're talking about putting the water line and so forth. It would run right behind the library. No matter what those 3 routes would be, it would come right there, and we would have to circumvent all the way down to 100, the back side of the college.
Okay.
And so none of it would shut off Timberwolf.
None of these 3 proposed routes mirror what Jamie's proposing in terms of route.
Correct.
No.
Correct.
So that's why I'm just asking.
Excuse me, as far as I know, these are ideas. No one has run that by me at all. I've heard all these ideas that everyone has said, but nothing is definite yet. That I can say. So I think that we should actually get together at some point and collaborate.
Absolutely. So thank you.
Just to kind of not say lay that to rest, but I think what Ms. Fields just recommended is a very good idea. David, you, Dr. Barrett, Ms. Fields, y'all need to go have lunch.
Well, warehouse should be involved in that.
Exactly.
Well, because in the airport is a huge asset too to the community. If it needs to be expanded, we want to make sure we don't lose any of that ability. I went to, back then it was Lake City Community College many years ago, and I never once used Timberwolf. I always came in the other way and for parking reasons or whatnot, but it's an important access point, and that's really crucial to you guys getting people in and out over there. So I think we need to all be on the same page, but if we can talk about that, because I know over time there's been discussions about that expansion, and you know, moving forward, the airport and utilities are the 2 things we do that actually creates revenue for the city and the overall area. So, yeah, Jamie.
So Paul, on the, what Ford asked, you wrote to the 5AD, what have you, feel comfortable with, go forward with the planning and permitting and everything?
Yes, I feel comfortable moving forward with it, and then at least go ahead and get the proposal, see what it looks like, and move forward with that. Because anything can be mitigated, or even if they build something off it, it'd just be least desirable to have something built off it. But it's not gonna be for that great a distance anyway, even if they extend the road. And even with the extension, for what I think, might have minimal impact to it anyway. And if we do know that's going to be the issue, you know, we can also do more to restrain it.
I think the issue of the road is if you extend the runway, there has to be a certain amount of clearance from the end of the runway
To the road.
and that would be what problem. It would have been created.
I mean, it would be a little bit of additional cost, even at that point, if we had to carrier pipe of the area where we assumed that the airport runway would be extended in case there ever was an issue. If we could just valve it both in.
Okay. So do we need to move forward on to the next phase, or would you recommend that?
I mean, I'll just make a recommendation that, maybe go ahead and get us over a proposal. And also have her, you know, check with her staff as far as if the airport runway does get put off of it or close to it.
And that's 5A, right? I agree.
And I'm also gonna ask about, running a line parallel to a railroad versus
Yeah, that's a very
the
good
road
question.
that we had talked about and what that would include as far as permitting or changing the design. But yeah, we'll finalize the scope and fee for just 5A, and we'll add a public outreach component so we can host a public workshop or two, make sure that's part of it. So it's clear from the beginning, and we'll of course want to coordinate with all the stakeholders in the area. And if the airport extension happens as depicted in these three alternatives, even the worst one does not add a substantial amount of length to the project. So it wouldn't, from my perspective, it wouldn't be difficult, but whoever's designing the extension and the new Timberwolf is gonna have a rough time with all those wetlands over there. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
That's gonna get expensive.
Talking about making more flooding,
Yeah, right? So
that's different impervious.
that's a different problem altogether, and I would recommend that whoever is doing the extension and building the updated road, that we would just coordinate to have the new water main be within the right of way of that road and be constructed at the same time, which is another thing that, you know, if your project is going on at the same time as another construction project, you're kind of saving costs that way. That makes you more competitive for grant funding too. There's actually a specific question on the alternative waters, the wastewater protection grants that we submitted last week for the State Road 47 I-75 ones. They asked if you were doing it in conjunction with another construction project, so they like to see that. But yeah, I'm happy to coordinate with all the stakeholders involved, and we'll make sure we build that into the scope, and I'll get that to you before the next meeting so we can discuss further.
Very good. Next thing on the agenda. I think that's you as well.
I don't know.
No. Oh, I skipped down. So we had the project cost increase. We've applied for the grants. Is there anything else we need to discuss on the 4775 project?
So I think we, like I said, we've applied for the grants. Feel good about them.
And if not, David said he would write us a personal check.
David said they would take care.
Okay, so we'll move on then to the, and I am glad to see that moving forward. So I think the end date September next year tentatively to have that wrapped up. Yeah,
Paul, on the estimated time, the answer on the grants, what did, I know we said something about it before, I can't remember when we may possibly hear from them.
I'm not sure when they announced the actual award of them. I know you keep going back and checking on the side, it shows who's been, once they're awarded or considered for award. I don't know if you know, Jamie, of national time, I haven't seen where they actually.
okay, moving on to the next thing, it was the Bell Street corridor.
I think Mr. Ford kind of touched on that, but go ahead, Jeremy, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I wish I was getting up behind this pole. Thank you.
Nice.
Mr. Chair, I think it might actually be beneficial to move the new business item 10 up to
Yes.
where we are now.
Let's do the presentation.
And I can go through, so this is the web-based presentation that I brought up. This is, so what I showed you before is more of a traditional PowerPoint. This is called an ArcGIS story map, and it's one of my preferred ways of presenting on projects that have a spatial component. So with this, the Bell Road project, we did a wastewater capacity analysis and we identified 6 improvements that could be done between basically Huddle House and St. Margaret's to alleviate those capacity concerns. And so with this presentation, it's kind of like a PowerPoint on the left and a moving map on the right. If y'all like this, I can utilize this in the future. This is also, the map portion is kind of similar to what I was talking about with giving Mr. Williams a login, username and password to the city's GIS system, so that it's all, password protected, web-based, and it's a way of just like interacting with the data without needing the GIS software. So it's kind of cool. I think this is your staff's first time seeing one of these, so we're gonna try to work together. If you could scroll down. So as you can see, I guess the font's a little bit small, and I do apologize for that. But the goals of the Bell Road wastewater capacity analysis project, and you can zoom in on that map to show everyone. You can just use the scroll wheel and zoom a little bit closer to show everyone. Oh, is it scrolling the whole window? Then just kidding. You can use the plus and the minus sign in the bottom right corner, and that should zoom the actual map itself. Yeah, so the colors don't show up great on the projector, but this is an example of the spatial data for the city's wastewater utility system. And Bell Road's at the north end, and then the St. Margaret's plant is, you can kind of see it in the middle there. But the goal was to review the existing collection system capacity from the Huddle House down to the St. Margaret's wastewater treatment facility, develop and calibrate a hydraulic model, and then to develop flow projections over the 20-year planning horizon and put those into the model as scenarios. As I said before, this project had a discrete goal, which was to look at a specific business that was coming in that had known flows that might be going onto Bell Road. And so that's what the scenarios reflect. Scenario 1 was kind of their one line of product, which is 130,000 gallons a day of wastewater, very near term, like in the first year. The second scenario was 2 lines, so that was 260,000 gallons a day, also in the very near term. And then we did a third scenario that looked at future growth in the city, plus the full build out of this mystery business that was going to come in with their product lines. And that was 570,000 gallons per day. And then based on those scenarios in the model, we developed recommended improvement projects and cost estimates. So you can go ahead and scroll down and we'll go through the 6 projects that we identified. The first one were improvements at lift station 5, and this one was really simple, just upsize the pumps to address the additional flow that would help prevent high water level alarms. And for prevent the lag pump from needing to turn on, basically the backup pump in the lift station. And I apologize for how small the font is on the left. I think you can scroll in with the scroll wheel this time and make it a little, no? I don't know. Apologize. But what you just did work. You can do that little zoom in. But basically this table represents our engineer's opinion of probable construction cost, a 20% construction contingency to keep in mind the current market volatility, 15% for professional services, because mind you, this was a planning level effort that's supposed to look out over 20 years. And so we're being really conservative with these numbers, and then what that total cost is. And so, for example, this project, the cost is roughly $101,000. That's just to upsize the pumps at this lift station to address the future flow. You can scroll down to the next project. And I can also in the future bring like actual visuals of the model and what it looks like with the pipes that are good versus the pipes that are bad. But this is kind of we're dipping our toe in the water here. And then as I present on the master plan, I think I'm going to bring kind of model scenarios for y'all to see. So this next project would be from lift station 190 to lift station 5, and it looks like our zoom got a little screwy, but you can actually just kind of click and drag the map down to see the full extent of that pipeline. Because if you grab the middle and drag down, yeah, there you go. And maybe zoom out 1 if you hit the minus button on the bottom right. Yeah, there we go. So I know it's a little hard to see. This is a work in progress with the projector, but lift station 190 is at the top, the green triangle. Lift station 5 is down there near the bottom. And the project would be to replace 7,200 linear feet of existing 6-inch force main. We're upsizing it to 8-inch. That's the green section of pipe. And then we would add an additional section of 5,000 linear feet of 8-inch force main to bypass the current gravity discharge. Basically, this helps alleviate capacity concerns in the existing gravity collection system and just pump it straight down to the next lift station. So we'd be going away from lift station 0, which you can kind of see in the yellow triangle. In this project, the engineer's opinion of probable construction costs plus contingency and professional services is $2.1 million. And again, that kind of fixes all of the pipeline constraints from Huddle House, which is lift station 190, down to the north end of downtown. You can go ahead and scroll.
How much, Jamie?
That is $2.1 million. So the basic construction cost is 1.5 plus contingency and professional services. So, and I'm,
And how much would that increase your sewage flow?
so these recommendations are all to meet the needs of scenario 3, which is 570,000 gallons per day. And we're just addressing constraints from Huddle House down to St. Margaret's. But yeah, that's what these projects are. So this focuses on the north end of town, kind of going away from the gravity system that's getting kind of full and just going from one lift station to the next. We call that repumping. Okay, so that's project 2. You can scroll down to the next one. So this third project is the Northwest Washington Street Force Main. It basically is the section of force main from the railroad, Northwest Railroad Street, down to kind of Young's Park right there. We would put in a new 10-inch force main. Again, this is to alleviate concerns in the existing gravity collection system, which is the piping is too small to handle that flow. So we're just going to blow past it and go from one lift station to the next. This would also be paralleling an existing clay pipe. So basically there's an old clay pipe that can't handle much more flow without breaking, but it's not useless. So instead we're just going to put a new line next to it. So the clay pipe doesn't take on any more flow and we just pump past it. That's what we're collecting. So that project, it's just under 3,000 linear feet of 10-inch force main, and that cost is $739,000. So you can go ahead and scroll to the next one. So this next project is actually kind of a two-parter. We are recommending the construction of a new lift station at Young's Park. And we kind of roughly placed at the corner of DeSoto and Lake Jeffrey. That was just conceptual, that can change. The goal is we're intercepting flow from the upstream lift station and gravity system, and then we're going to send it through a new force main straight to the plant, basically, because again, this section of town is older. The pipes are typically made of clay, and so they break easily under too much pressure, if they're too full. And there are environmental concerns in this area because there are those lakes that are right there. And so the idea is you put in a new lift station to intercept that flow. So instead of going all through the gravity system along the lake, you just pump it straight to the plant. But we would design it so that you can periodically flow through the gravity system to keep it flushed out, keep your solids suspended, which is important. We don't want to completely eliminate the flow. And that's because this gravity pipeline goes behind houses that are on the lake, and it'd be really challenging to take that pipeline out and put a new one in. The topography works against us, the elevations work against us, and it would be very expensive to do that construction right next to the lake. And that pipeline's like a single point of failure right now for that area. So we're creating a secondary route, but not taking it fully offline. So just the lift station itself would be roughly $486,000. And I want to say that these cost estimates are all from a very recent bid we had on a Jacksonville Beach project that included all the force main components and lift station components that you're seeing today. So these are really up-to-date costs based on the market that we're seeing now. But you'll notice if you compare this to the report, they are about 40% higher from what we found last year. That's how crazy the market is. So if you scroll down to the next one, this Young's Park lift station would go into this new pipeline. I'm going to walk up to the map. It's kind of hard to see, but the pipeline I keep talking about, the single point of failure, is this gravity main that comes along Lake Montgomery Ave right here. And it's behind all of these houses. So to go in and replace that pipe or do the work here would be very challenging construction-wise. But from an environmental concern, we don't want to put any more flow in this pipe because it would break and go in the lake, and nobody wants that. So this is kind of the concerning area all along this strip along Lake Montgomery. And so the plan is put a new force main from the new Young's Park lift station down the road, straight down McFarland to the St. Margaret's plant. So it's a long pipeline. It's almost 2 miles. It's just shy of 10,000 linear feet there. So this is the most expensive standalone project, but realistically it would be combined with the previous one that we just talked about, okay? But this pipeline alone is $2.29 million, roughly. And this, again, allows us to bypass all that older gravity system, kind of east of this proposed pipeline, and take the pressure off that part of the system and reduce environmental concerns. If you scroll down, our last project is, we're calling it an optimization project. This is one of the goals of city staff, is to kind of optimize the flow between the two plants. St. Margaret's is nearing capacity. And
Well,
Cape Light,
Jason asked me,
right, exactly.
What capacity can St. Margaret's hold?
It's not nearing like the DEP concern limit, which is 80%, but it's a 2.95 million gallon a day capacity, and it's getting a little over 2 million. So we're getting close. And so while we can send this flow to St. Margaret's and it can handle it, we don't want to hamstring ourselves from development throughout the rest of town. And so this is the recommended optimization project. I know it's just looking like a straight line through that property there, so we can go around the ballpark, but this is just giving you the idea. So we would install a short stretch of force main and valve it so that we can redirect that flow to Kicklighter, but still have the option to send it to St. Margaret's as needed based on whatever percentage of that flow it can handle. And so that gives staff more control over how the flow is going through the system, but gives them the opportunity to send not all of the north side of town to Kicklighter, but whatever percentage of it that they want, because this would be a big line taking a lot of the north side of town. And so that would be just under 2,000 linear feet. The real project realistically would be a little bit longer because we probably want to follow the roads. But again, it's just the idea that you could kind of shoot it over this way to the line that goes to Kicklighter. And it's a relatively inexpensive project, all things considered. It's just under $600,000. But with this, all of it together, you get to move a lot of wastewater around and you give a lot more control, and it allows you to open up capacity at St. Margaret's, which therefore allows more development on the east side of town where a lot of our industrial growth is starting to come in, and it helps alleviate some of the choke points over there. So kind of the last three projects do all tie in together, but we wanted to show that they can each stand alone as well. Like even if you didn't do, for example, the Youngs Park lift station and force main, you could still connect to a line off of St. Margaret's and redirect flow to Kicklighter. You could still do that project by itself if that was your priority. You could just do the Youngs Park lift station and force main and not do the connection to Kicklighter at all. And so these are the 6 projects that came out of the model. And you can actually, where it says Kicklighter Water Reclamation Facility, you can click that. It's a button, and it's supposed to zoom out to show you where Kicklighter is, if it works right. It does. All right, I'm excited about this map. I got to work on it with the colors, but so you can kind of see just that little connector piece will connect us to the existing lines that go down to Kicklighter.
So what is the total cost of all the pieces?
Of all the pieces together, it's 6.3 million. And if you scroll down one more, it actually has the summary table with all the costs. And if you have any questions, we can click on these buttons to zoom to each of the individual projects. But yeah, the grand total of all 6 is $6,327,180. And that is an updated cost estimate based on recent bids from the last 60 days. So that's as close to an updated number as we're going to get in today's market. And that's, again, to do all 6.
Now, this plan, it adds the capacity, and with what those companies want, is there more capacity to take some of those septics up there on the north side offline and put them into our system?
Yes, and so what we looked at when we did this model is along this pipeline, we looked at the commercial and residential areas that feed into it currently, and we used the medium rate county growth rate to assume residential and commercial growth in the area, and it exceeded the number of vacancies for basically empty parcels. And so we assumed full infill development along with the 4 lines from this proposed company, and these projects address all of that flow. So it's a big company coming in 500 and some odd thousand gallons a day from Bell Road, plus full infill development along the route of this corridor that covers all of it. So the septic to sewer projects that you're talking about, I can't say we explicitly looked at converting septic to sewer, but we did at least look at no more vacant parcels. And I am assuming in this moment, which is a little bit dangerous, but I'm assuming the numbers would come out probably close. And if not, we're conservative when we model. So it's not like to the gallon, 1 gallon over is gonna break the system. It's to within a level of services established by the city and a level of comfort that they have. And so there's always wiggle room built in. And then the city is constantly doing projects to reduce inflow and infiltration into the system. They're repairing manholes, they're lining their force mains and their gravity mains. And it's, each of those projects helps you build a little bit more capacity too. And so the benefit to this model is whatever septic to sewer projects you want to do, we can estimate the flow, plug it into the model where it would come in and see how it affects the lines. And that's the benefit to having, Paul has this model data, so he could even go in and change the number in a lift station and see what happens to the rest of his pipes. And so that's one of the big benefits of the big master plan is you'll have one of these for all of the city and all of your service area. And so you'll be able to kind of, Paul and his staff can add in, a development here, a business there, and see if there are any lines that they would have issues with down the road.
Are you looking at phasing it or prioritizing elements of the project?
So for Bell Road, we did not. We just identified in 20 years, this business filled out, what do we need to do to make all of it happen? In the report, we did talk about kind of in this scenario, what happens? And so you can kind of parse out a prioritization from there. But this project did not include prioritization. It was just what do we need to do to meet the need? For the master plan, we will include a prioritization analysis and kind of a recommended schedule of implementing the projects to address the demand as it grows in 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years. This project just didn't have that level of detail.
So Jamie, in your opinion, relevant to Todd's Lake down there, with the issues that we got down there, in your opinion, wouldn't this kind of put us a little bit farther up the line as far as accessibility to possible DEP grants, EPA grants, right on down?
Absolutely.
Because it's, of course, Paul, anybody that knows has been here a while, that could be, they were talking about a minute ago, it's, that's a 30-minute catastrophe way down. And I think that would be a good immediate sales pitch, if you want to call it, to, our partners in Tallahassee. Because, Paul, I'm not speaking out of turn here. That thing's in bad shape, correct? That line going through that park.
Yes, and the whole, all the phases are important, but if we could only get funding to do one, I would love to do the one going around the lake, because, like Jamie said, that is our single point of failure. If that line goes out,
You got
it's
trouble.
not only gonna be a challenge to repair, it's gonna be an environmental nightmare.
And we could exceed that $6 million real quick. You got to bring emergency services in and put something like that. And so, Jamie, what's the recommended schedule, if you want to say, to go forth? And this may be a two-part question as far as on the city side. Who's Paul and y'all's organization is going after these types of DEP grants? I guess what I'm saying. I realize the council is going to have to give you direction, but relevant to that being, who are you the man that goes after all the DEP grants? Okay, got you. Okay. I just think that's a very, very sensitive issue that we're dealing with here. And but I agree with what Mr. Ford said earlier. I've been thinking about this thing for a long time. You got issues down 100 down there beyond Knee Black and all that there. And I hope in my tenure, the North Florida Mega Industrial Site, we see something massive happen out there. But we need to put our dollars where it makes the most sense. And we got a lot of critical situations here in the community. And we got to get a plan together to go forward to this, in my opinion.
I can definitely see moving forward on all of this project. It takes care of tons of problems. One, we've got customers ready to hook up, kind of like you alluded to earlier. Two, if we can tie in some of those septic tanks off the system, that'll make us look even better for those DEP grants, as well as help the city grow, because when we attach them, they're going to be annexed in. So I mean, there's a lot of opportunity there that way, and then alleviating the problem, because I don't think anybody wants to be wearing that when it fails.
It's not just that line, it's the other play line as well.
Mhm.
That's right,
Washington.
Washington Street,
Washington Street
yeah.
line, that would be a pretty bad disaster.
And nothing's worse than having a break. But I think if we go ahead, I think the next step on this is to go ahead and present it as a plan. I mean, she's got it far enough. I think we can bring it forward. I know we need funding. Jamie, can you come up with the funding?
I can sure try.
Yeah.
There are,
Pay for
there's definitely a decent number of grants that these projects would qualify for. Right off the bat, I'm thinking of DEP calls it SWAG, it's Surface Water Something Grant, I always forget what the A stands for. But it used to be TMDL, Total Maximum Daily Load, and the 319, which is through EPA, they're all related to point source and non-point source pollution, basically surface water protection. And so that's a great pot to go after, especially with the risk to the lake and the water bodies being so close there. And then I completely agree, septic to sewer projects. I mean, you get Springs grants for those, you can apply. I have to look when the next application period is gonna be, what month? That'll be the end of this year. Swanee has a later application date than the other districts. The other districts want them in like October. Swanee's more like January, February, but that would be for the Springs Protection Grants. And then of course, the ARPA money, the American Rescue Plan Act, again, they're focused on equity and resiliency. And I mean, repairing old, poor quality lines that are next to bodies of water, that is resiliency if I've ever heard it, projects that replace lines will reduce inflow and infiltration, which therefore kind of helps be resilient during flooding. And then again, all these communities are generally lower income, so we can qualify on the equity standpoint. So as soon as that notice of funding opportunity comes available, we can submit a whole pile of applications to that, and I'm sure we will, to cover a wide swath of need, because again, they haven't really released what they're looking for, but they're not just looking for wastewater projects. We're looking for all kinds of utility projects and or projects that benefit things that were impacted by COVID, So there's a whole range of projects we can apply for. So I'm sure we'll have a stack to go in, and they have a lot of money. It's $3 billion right there alone. So yeah, that's just off the top of my head. We can come up with a whole matrix of opportunities to submit these for. And then worst case scenario, there's always state revolving fund money. There's clean water and drinking. I was mixing them up, Dave. But they have two funds, one for water and one for wastewater, and they're basically almost no interest for communities like this that are lower income, rural area of opportunity communities. And so you could basically go after a no interest or very, very low interest loan, of which a significant portion may be forgiven because of the rural and economically disadvantaged status of the community. So your odds are quite good to get the state revolving fund money. They have their first quarterly meeting in August, and they have a meeting each quarter after that. So we likely would not make August happen, but the next one I would recommend August, November, and submitting some projects by then.
What was that bank called? Did you sit on that same conference I did in Orlando when Mr. Ford and us was down there? What they call that bank on that creation of that? I have to look back through my notes, but exactly.
I can send you, the Florida League of Cities has a whole website dedicated to the ARPA stuff that's coming. I'll forward that to Mr. Krause and Ms. Fields, and y'all can take a look at that and kind of see the resources that they have. But yeah, as soon as that funding's available, we need to go after it, for sure.
Is there anything we need to do to better position ourselves for it, like moving forward with the planning phase, or?
I mean, absolutely, getting these projects into design and permitting would definitely help your odds. But if you wanted to do all 6, you're gonna have to do an RFQ, because CCNA, the Competitive Consultants Negotiation Act, means that if a project you can issue a project that's up to $500,000 for a study or up to $4 million in construction without doing a competitive selection process. And so that means engineers like me who are under your continuing services agreement, as long as our studies or our construction projects stay under that amount, you can just hand us a task assignment. But something of this size needs to be competitively selected for. And so the first step might be to do an RFQ for firms to work on these projects, do either as one big one or as multiple task assignments, or select multiple firms and hand out, a project to each. I don't want to give projects away from me because I like working for y'all, but I also want to stay above board. And I think something of this size needs to be done through an RFQ, just to be ethical and appropriate. So I don't know that I can do much to move it forward other than help to develop kind of what that kind of project description would be and work with city staff to provide that, but then it would need to be competitively selected.
And if we move forward on that, I think on the planning side of it, possibly we could work on some of the funding. I mean, in my idea, and again, I'm just one person that sits on the council, but we do have some CARES money sitting there. And I would like to see it spent on something like this rather than any of the other stuff we looked at. But if we could get, I mean, this is going to be the first stroke. It's going to be roughly 630, thinking about it. And so we're talking about a pretty big chunk up front. I don't know. I think we should go after the whole thing. I think we can go after different grants for each part, but I think we should start the process on the whole project.
I mean, Todd, I think the county stepped forward and committed that, a good portion of this ARPA money was gonna go for them. I'll speak for the board, but we had a conversation relevant to that. Of course, we are marked 10.2, was it, 10.3? And of course, every time you have a meeting about anything in relevance, we're spending ARPA money. And I get that, and I'm fine with that, but, we are, I think our board is definitely committed to, putting a very large source of that money, or portion of that money, towards infrastructure in the community as a whole. And of course, we got our issues at Fort White, we got to tackle. I think we're off and running on a pretty good plan there, right, for Rocky?
Yeah, for the water.
And and of course, we got, things happening at Ellisville, so we're committed on our end of it, but I agree with Todd. It's available, they will not spend it sooner than later. That way Jamie can keep a job.
I appreciate that.
So the RFQ process, Paul, what would we do on that? We would bring the council to request the RFQ, and that'd be the step. And I think have this presentation at the council meeting will be pretty good. I think in the importance of it, Bell Road's already shown it's going to grow, and I think that's going to be one of the hottest areas for the city after the 47 interchange. So if we can be prepared and ready, it only positions us to be more successful. So I'd like to see that RFQ process come to the next meeting if possible, or as soon as possible, so we can get that discussion out there.
That's that whole project.
Yes.
Basically, the city's got some work to do. Maybe stage on this, right? So basically what you're saying, this needs to be done, but they need to go out for RFQs for engineers, you don't think?
Correct.
They should just hire you direct to do it.
I mean, I would love that, but,
There is rules, regulations.
and as I said in my presentation, the intent of breaking them up into 6 is to show that each of these projects can stand alone. However, ethically speaking, they were all developed under a single study, and they do all go towards the same end goal. And so as much as I would love you to hand me 6 individual task assignments to do all of these designs, I feel it would be more appropriate to do an RFQ, and then you can either, and of course your procurement staff should certainly weigh in on this, but in my opinion, you could either have it be one big project that one firm designs all 6, or you could have it where all at once, you could have one firm and they are issued assignments under that one RFQ agreement, or you could select multiple firms and have them designed kind of in tandem, and then the process would certainly move along a little bit faster that way too. If you divided the work up and then just,
So basically, I would say y'all take care of y'all's business, see what is, comes back for the design, and then we'll discuss the finance.
Very good. So, Paul, you have any feelings about how it should be put out to bid, or?
I would rather break it down into individual task assignments myself.
It'll be easier dealing with the current engineer.
It would be quicker, more streamlined, and like I said, we could focus on the major task assignment, I believe, would be trying to take care of those problems that we know are there. The reason I say that is that project, now when I talk about that, I'm talking about the one for the lift station and going to St. Barrows to be able to send it to kick ladder. Twofold on that. One, it relieves capacity at St. Margaret's if we can send it to kick ladder. That helps the economic development on the east side of town and any development that comes over there, so we have extra capacity. Plus, it takes out a ticking time bomb that's waiting to happen. That's why I would rather, if we could, because there's enough capacity in the system right now. If a business or two come on the Bell Road and they wanted to, they started operating tomorrow and they didn't have the astronomical use, we could still supply them up to about 130,000 gallons of sewer and be able to supply them and get them up and running. That would give us time to work on the other phases. I would love to see us be able to divert the flow off of them terracotta pipes and get that. That's why my recommendation would be just do as a task assignment, start it on the first phase, phase it out, and then we can still apply for the grants and have them ready to go on the next phases and add task assignments as they come.
That makes sense.
I would like to see it presented both ways to the council though, because I think, going back to what Jamie said, I know there's some rules when looking at it from the outside as one thing, it definitely goes above the limit. I think the limit's 500,000 or.
yes, it's 500,000 for a study, or if the project will have a $4 million construction cost, over 4 million, then the engineering of it needs to go out to a competitive process. I mean, it's at the city's discretion. That's what the law is. And
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point though. So I think to look at it from
I
the.
want to do the work. I just.
Well, no. Yeah, and I think that's great. We have that relationship and it needs to be done, but we need to make sure we're doing it as fully ethical as possible. One, and present both options, I think. I mean, I don't have any problem with going ahead and just picking two phases and say, let's do this because of the severity of it and how quick it needs to be done. But I think if we look at it as one project, I think it's going to provide more opportunity for funding as well. And the funds, I think if we get the 5.1 million, I think is the number I've heard.
I will say from a grant funding perspective, phasing it would make you, I believe, more competitive if for certain grants, if only because you're biting off, smaller pieces and they don't have to, like asking for $1 million versus $6 million, one's a little bit easier to fund than the other depending on the grant that you're going after. So like the big federal ARPA one, they would happily fund like a multi-million-dollar project, but DEP might want to keep it a little bit smaller. And so honestly, I really can see it both ways. I mean, phasing it based on how your businesses are coming in makes sense to do a little engineering and a little construction job and then do the next one. But if you wanted to pursue it as one big project, it would have to be done, kind of a standalone away from your continuing services agreement. So I'd be happy to do it either way. I just want to be everything above board with council and the committee.
Would the cost of engineering be any different if you done it as one project versus several projects?
Yeah. And
Because I know
honestly,
permitting and stuff, if you do get independent, you got 6 permits you have to give instead of one big permit, I think.
yes, I do think you would find some professional services cost savings by doing it as one big project, because as survey would be a single mobilization, geotech and environmental would be a single mobilization. Like you said, you would have 1 or 2 permits as opposed to 6. And so there's always cost savings to combining projects like that, but then it is a bigger effort. And so I can't speak to how it would affect the schedule. It just kind of depends. But yeah, there's a little bit of savings there too.
And nothing's to say that once the plan is completely in place, it couldn't be broken into the different pieces for the construction aspect either.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can bid it out however you want. I mean, like you could do the RFQ and have one big construction job that one firm goes after, or if you want it to be constructed quicker, it actually might make sense to do, multiple smaller construction jobs. You could even look at doing a design build, which I don't have a lot of experience with design bid build projects or whatever, so I'd have to bring someone more knowledgeable than me in to discuss, but
It would make sense to me to engineer and permit the entire project and then bid it out in separate phases.
yep.
I think it'd be the most economical way to do it.
Mr. Ford, in committee, David just brought up a very good point. As a collective, cooperative, format, if you want to say, we could consider taking it from Bell Road to the north end of Lake City with Arcadis, who we've got under contract. Then, of course, the city could take it from there to Kicklider, St. Margaret's, and then phase it out there. That may be an alternative situation. David made a good point there. Because I'm always operate on the side of caution whenever you're doing these RFQs, and I'm not trying to give you an open checkbook here, but it costs money to educate other firms, to bring them up to snuff with some of the scenarios that we all face each and every day. And of course, Arcadius on our side, if you want to say, they've got knowledge of the community in the county, and as well as Jones Evans of the world and other firms that y'all use, I'm sure. Or do. It's just a thought, it's a very good alternate that, David shared with me there. So there's another way too.
And I wouldn't have an issue with that because we've worked with Arcadis before on the Bell and others,
That's right.
so we're familiar with their engineers like we are with Jamie. They have a lot of our information as well, so, I mean, and technically it might be a way to get it done quicker if you have to.
That's right.
And it's all within CCNA limits, so I don't feel slimy.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. I could see how that would be good. I think that might be the best way to present it because they've already got the knowledge of the Bell Road corridor. And it could even shorten the time frame. That might make the most sense to move forward.
Like Mr. Ford said, bring your information all collected.
Yeah.
Chunk it.
It would
Keep the ball
be-
rolling a little bit.
It would mean the more complicated projects would be on the city, less complicated.
Yeah, it'd be projects 1 and 2 would be under Arcadis basically, which is the pump upgrades
Under the
and
county. Whoever we hire,
under, it would be
Not
under,
giving it to any
I
vendor.
apologize.
not giving it to any vendor.
Phase 1, the Columbia County phase of the project would be projects 1 and 2, which is the pump upgrades, as well as the 12,200 linear feet of force main, the replacement and the new, going from Huddle House from 190 down to 5. So that would be the Columbia County chunk, and then the Lake City chunk would be the Washington Street force main, the Youngs Park lift station, the Youngs Park force main, and then the Kicklider optimization force main, which I think is also a very reasonable way to split it up too, as far as kind of the impacts to the sections of the system. That makes sense.
Well, it offered,
Overlapping each other.
Right.
yeah, and it gives some more opportunities for funding too.
Yep.
So that would always help
Good
out.
point, too.
I mean, I think that might be absolutely the best way to move forward. But whatever we do, we need to kind of start the process to get it in front of the council and in front of the commission so we can get this rolling because this is a pretty important piece. So I would like to see us move forward as soon as possible on that piece.
David, what would be the process on our side to get work like all rolling?
Would be if city and county both agree, we take it forward. We'd approach our board with our project, approach There are more than there. We would do it under continuing services. We have 3, 4 engineering firms that provide continuing services. So theoretically, any one of those firms suited could be the one.
Well, I'll commit on our point, or our part, and I think Mr. Ford will too. We'll get this rolling ASAP on our side. City to.
I guess we need to get an agreement. We have something to bring forward.
Would you want an interlocal agreement on that?
I don't see where one would actually be necessary. I mean, like I said, the projects would be overlapping. It'd be a start point and an end point. But I mean, if the county, feel more comfortable, that's, you know, it's, I mean, it's a project's gonna, a lot of it is in the county as well, because some of them failed.
All with 5 points.
So I mean, it's,
Yeah, that's right.
you know, it's actually two split projects, really, if you look at it, if you split it up. But I mean, I leave that up to.
It really don't matter to me. I'm just saying if we need it, let's do it.
I think whatever Fred and Joel comes to as far as the legal aspect of it, keep it all, rely on their information. I'd be confident of that for sure.
So a large part of the project that the county would have actually is in the county. Makes sense, grant funding.
Does the do you need anything in writing to the county to design improvements to your utility system?
Basically, if we come down to, same way we did on Bell, you know, we just be able to review the plans, make sure everything's done to our standards for material, stuff like that, so outside of that. Because even on, like, on the lift station, stuff like that, we would have our personnel there, you know, all the upgrades and stuff would be done to our standards we have. We would just be there, basically have inspected there. However, that pans out.
I think that's a good way to move forward. So do we need any kind of motion or anything on that to move it forward? You're not sleeping over there, are you?
No, I'm looking at the same concerns Ms. Bell's expressed under the CCNA, but as far as your motion, you always want to have a recommendation of what the individual council and county commissioners are going to take for a recommendation. The administration has to put it on the agenda as a recommendation.
That's right.
Motion, what you're
Okay, so with that being said, I'll make the motion that the county and the city move forth with the plan design with separating the project in phases of the Bell Street, what's your heading up there, Bell
The Bell Road wastewater capacity.
Road wastewater capacity project. Take that, interpret it how you can. I think you got my point.
And splitting the numbers 1 through 6, and 1 and 2 would have been,
1 and 2 would be the county phase, and 3 through 6 would be the city phase.
okay,
1 and 2 in the county would be the county phase, 3 through 6 in the city would be the city.
Correct. I do think lift station 5 is technically within city limits, but that falls under the county phase of the project, so. But yeah, basically from Bell Road down to lift station 5 is the county phase. And then from Washington Street to Kicklighter is the city phase.
okay, so we have a motion on that. Could we get a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so that takes us to, is that everything for you?
The next one's mine too.
Oh, the alternative water supply. Okay, go ahead.
The update is simply that we're still waiting on approval of our numbers from the Water Management District. They have had staff turnover in the last few weeks. The head of their projects team left, and so we're working to coordinate with the staff that are in the new roles to move this forward. Hoping to have a better update for you next time, but coordination is challenging sometimes.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, everyone. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Ms.
ma'am.
Bell. Chair, do you want to address Plan B on how you wish to proceed on the Bell Street corridor plan that you just addressed?
The second,
You're each going to take a recommendation back to your council,
that's right.
our boards. And Mr. Foreman, I anticipate Mr. Foreman and I will address more thoroughly Ms. Bell's concerns that she mentioned at the microphone. Do you want a Plan B as a recommendation now, or do you want to wait if we need a Plan B on procurement to come back and discuss that further at the next committee?
I mean, I'm okay with having, if you guys get together and we can't do it that way and it needs to be bid as the one project, I'm okay with proceeding with an RFP. Would everybody think that would be the way to go if there's any issue legally with doing it this way? I don't foresee an issue,
Yeah.
but I'm not an attorney.
What are you, I guess I'm kind of lost what you're stating here. I understand an option B. Are you thinking there might be some, legalities in option A or?
I'll go back over. Yes, there's some things that need to be looked at. Ms. Bell pointed them out. I'll briefly readdress it. One is that last year, or the year before, what we call the CCNA, Consultant Competitive Negotiation Act, which regulates engineering. It allows us to do one study of up to $500,000. And if we go over that threshold, then you have to go out and procure competitively through an RFQ, request for qualification. If we can dissect the 6 projects and get it under 500, then we're fine. But if we cannot, then what I'm hearing is that you would like to keep on Jones Edmonds and then task it out. Well, Ms. Bell's already identified to you that the 6 tasks or the projects came from one study. So there may be an issue. We will research it. If there is an issue, then the question is, are you going to readdress this in August, or do you want a Plan B to take to your board before?
Yeah, so as far as just parceling it out, I don't think that would be the way to go. I mean, like I was mentioning, we could make that one of the 2 options if we had brought up all 6. But if they move forward with 1 and 2, and we're doing 3 through 6, I think that takes that completely off the table based on the values.
Well, the values I saw were still going to be well over 500 on 4 through 6. What they done?
Yeah, so it's not, okay, so 1 and 2 together would be 246, 247. And the 3 through 6 would be, you'll make me do math in public, 136,
So it's still a
380, 390, it's under 500.
Yeah.
If you break it 1 and 2 and then 3 through 6, you're under 500 on both sides. And again, these are our rule of thumb estimates based on 15% of estimated construction costs, and actual scope and fee would identify more specific professional service costs. And either way, this is a very good, I think, estimate based on kind of what we've been seeing lately. So it looks like they're separate, but I appreciate the additional legal review.
From over in that seat, I thought the E on the first column was for the engineering.
Well, you're doing good because I can't even read those numbers. So
Well, can you read it from here?
Using all that.
I'm having to write stuff down.
Well,
So,
I think we're fine under those numbers. We'll readdress it.
Yeah, and I think if something comes up, I think if we have to call a meeting, we just call a meeting and
Yeah.
address it.
I think so.
This should send us down straight there.
Yeah.
Expedient.
And I think it shows too, we're working together to get things accomplished for the people of the county and the city. So, I mean, I think it's good to move forward. Wonderful, exciting things to do.
Yeah.
Oh, everybody likes talking about that lumpy water.
Thank y'all very much.
Thank you so much for coming all the way over.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think we only have one more item. Last but not least, because we moved up item 10, is Cody talking about the septic at the St. Margaret's wastewater treatment facility.
I've got handouts here. I just got this report in this morning. Adam's got it pulled up there on the screen too. Y'all can see that okay. We'll just go with that. Does anybody want the handout? I'm not gonna go into great detail with it. You can take it home.
Yeah, I'll just take it when we're done. Yeah.
So I know you want to hear, what kind of capacity we have at St. Margaret's to receive the septic and what it's going to cost and all that. So, Adam, if you'll just scroll down to page 4, we'll start on the different options we have of receiving it. There you go. So, alternative number 1 would be to discharge to a manhole prior to the existing headworks, which is pretty much what we were doing in the past when we were accepting septic. And we saw a lot of issues with that when trying to maintain the mixed liquor in the plant. I told y'all before at the last meeting, we'd like to maintain a steady rate in there, and it's caused some major fluctuations and other issues through the plant. And based on that, they did some calculations. If you'll scroll down a little bit more, Adam, right there, at plant capacity, the plant's permitted for 3 million gallons a day, and if our flow was that at the current loadings on our influent, we could receive, there'd be enough oxygen available in our aeration to receive 7,200 gallons per day of septic. Scroll down to the next page, Adam. Okay, and what you see there, the 21,500 gallons per day of septic would be maxed out on our current average flow rates at the plant. If we brought the plant up to capacity on the loadings, then we could receive 21,500 gallons per day. They recommend that if we choose this option, to start out with 8,000 gallons per day, and if we don't see any problems over a month, couple months, then increase it by 4,000 gallons per day in increments until we do start seeing issues or adverse effects, and then we'll back off to where it's an acceptable level. But keep in mind that if we get up around that 20,000 gallon a day mark, then we're putting the plant at capacity, even though we still have flow capacity. The loading on the plant is be putting a strain on it. Scroll down now to the next page, table number 5. Or I'm sorry, table number 4. You were on it. This shows the total cost of what it would take to get the plant, everything that we would need to be able to accept the septic upstream manhole. Total for that would be $1,080,000. That's an estimate. It could vary a little bit. And then the next one will show the operating and maintenance costs on that. Scroll down to table 5. They're $234,000 annually to operate and maintain the system. That includes the labor, the power usage that it's going to take, the additional chemicals that we're going to have to use, the biosolids disposal. All that's going to increase with the added solids loading that the septic is going to put on the plant. So scroll down to table number 6. This shows the advantages and disadvantages. It can generate a revenue stream for the city, provides a much needed service for septic tank pump out industry. The disadvantages, it's going to significantly increase the plant O&M costs, power usage, labor, all that. It's potential for odor generation. We did factor in for odor control. We'll need to confirm there is a viable market from the septic holders and that they will want to pay the rate that we're going to have to charge to break even. Consumes the capacity of the plant, potential for excess foaming and aeration, MLSS fluctuations, suspended solids in the plant, and does not allow for controlled introduction of septic. By that, like we were, accepting it before, they were dumping right into the headwork. So like a tanker would come in there, dump a load of septic right into the plant, and it went right into the aeration. And that's what caused all those major fluctuations and all the issues. Alternative number 2, which is the one I like the best, and we'll see later on the engineers recommend it as well. Construction of the pre-treatment facilities to specifically handle the septic. Like I mentioned before, we have an existing tank there that we could modify. We could add in the septic receiving facility, which further screen it, move any big debris and all that out of there. Blowers to aerate it, and then a pumping system to add it to the plant at a controlled rate. Scroll down to table number 7, please, Adam. And the total cost for that one would be $1,204,000. So not that big of a difference for what I feel is a major advantage on treatment and saving capacity on the plant because of further aeration. Table number 8 discusses the O&M cost of that unit, which is roughly the same as the other option. Table number 9, advantages and disadvantages. Allows for controlled introduction of septic to the treatment process, and generate revenue, provide much needed service for septic tank pump out. It consumes less available treatment capacity due to the additional aeration. Disadvantages are the same as the other one, more O&M costs, potential for odor, and farmers viable market. So on the first option, I kind of skipped ahead there a little bit. I think the break-even point for the city would be 11 cents per gallon. That's breaking even. On option number 2, break even for the city, I believe it was 11 cents per gallon. And then they put in their alternative number 3 down there at the bottom. Discharge to the aerobic digesters. I won't even go over that. They, based on the treatment of the aeration in the digesters, they say, based on the required frequency of dewatering, only partial stabilization of the septic may occur. Prior to dewatering operations, the generation of odors would also be a major issue, and odor control facilities at the digesters would be required. For these reasons and the fact that the existing aerobic digesters are somewhat undersized for a plant with a capacity of 3 million gallons a day, we do not recommend the introduction of septic directly into the digester. So alternative number 3 is pretty much off the table. Their recommendations are that, scroll down, Adam, to page 10. They realize there's a high demand for septic treatment facilities, and I think it's like you said, Mr. Sampson, I think it's only going to get worse over time. Typical charges for treating that at other facilities is 10 to 12 cents per gallon. They recommend that we start out with an initial charge of 13 cents per gallon. That allows for roughly $50,000 annual profit for the city. And keep in mind that is at an 8,000 gallons per day average. So if we don't get 8,000 gallons in a day, that profit margin is going to shrink a little bit there. And also, as the flows increase at the wastewater facility, then the amount of septic that we can receive is going to go down. Actually, our capacity is going up. The flow floating on the actual influent flows. So, there's, some cost breakdowns, like I said, I'll give these to y'all, you can go over in further detail if you want. Pretty much it, all I got, if you got any.
I have a couple quick questions. So the 8,000 gallons a day, but I couldn't quite make out. So what's with the option 2, how many gallons a day can we actually treat on the high side? Did it say 30?
Number 2, yeah, I believe it was the same as option number 1, the 21,000 gallons per day is maxing out the plant.
Okay.
So,
I didn't know if
that's
that would
why
have changed with the tank and the way it's entered, so.
no, that's why they're recommending start out at 8,000 gallons a day, and then we can increase that, and, you know, until we start seeing adverse effects on the plant, and we'll probably back it down some. Or like I said, flows increase at the plant, we may back it off.
And so another variable we control will be the pricing per gallon. So it could be that, you know, initially we're not the cheapest, I wouldn't think. And I don't think we'd want to be the cheapest provider, but there's a lot of factors on to where you're going to dump to. You know, what's the gas cost to take it, wherever you're going, or the diesel, and compared to this. So I think we'll have the other issue is I think we'll tap it out at 8,000 a day. I don't know what the actual demand is. I think that is the next step. What's the demand? And knowing what the demand is can help make that decision. I think something like this would definitely qualify for some of that the grant funding. I'm not sure how that would work exactly.
Yeah, I had a couple of emails back and two with Jamie, and she seems to think that there's probably we could probably maybe tie it into some Springs grants from nutrient removal. And there's a couple other options in there that we can look into.
Cody, is this at the St. Margaret's or the Kicklighter?
St. Margaret.
Gotcha.
And I think option 2 is the only one really to look at there. I mean, I don't like the manhole idea. I think that would create some issues, and definitely don't like number 3. But I think option 2 makes the most sense, because if we decide to move forward, you've got the tank, it can go into the tank, and then you can control the flow and how it works to make it, you know, don't want to kill off the bacteria. And at the same time, starting at 8,000, so the break-even point for 8,000 gallons a day was the 12 cents.
Yeah.
Or 11 cents.
11
And then
break even.
that's at 8,000 gallons a day. So if you got it up to like 15.
Table number 10.
Does it have different options for the, oh yeah, it does. Okay. Yeah, I definitely want to look at that. I think that would be good to look at. Because also the cost is variable as well.
Yep.
And it takes that into account too there, it looks like. So there's a point, like when you hit that certain usage, that you actually drop in profitability as well. So that's something you can control by what we take in a day. But as far as like what the actual price point is, I think that's the survey we need to make too, and say, hey, what's available? Who knows? Maybe 15% is good. I don't know. I think they can do it for 8 now, but that's about to be changing too. So as price changes, everything goes up. It might be, you know, we don't need to be the cheapest provider if we decide to do it. We just need to be an option, you know, available that's going to be revenue for the city at a positive income. But I think I would like to review this study a little bit before we move forward and present this to the council. I think I'd like to take a look at it. You just got that today?
Yes, sir.
Who generated this for you?
Midtower and Associates. They're the engineer that's handling all the upgrades at St. Margaret's. They looked into it.
Yeah.
Rocky, how many gallons does you reckon Branford? Hard to say.
He keeps a record, but I mean, hey, just we done probably 8,000 gallons a day.
Is that right?
Yeah, just us.
that's another thing that's gonna have to be looked at too. How do we make this fair to all the septic haulers whenever we're only gonna take out 8,000 gallons a day? Do
Well,
we
I
say,
don't even know if it's worth it to bring that together today.
do we say first come, first served? Do we give them all a quota? How, I mean,
Well, who's gonna show up? It's the thing, if you got 8,000 gallons a day, it's gonna be, you're gonna be at capacity by 10 o'clock in the morning, you know?
Cody's trying to prevent a ride at the sliding gate back here is all he's doing.
I mean, even 20,000.
Yeah.
You know, that's a low number really for what everybody does today.
Wow.
You got, you know, 4 or 5 companies dumping, and they all dumping, I would say 6,000-8,000 gallons a day.
And so.
You're up to 30,000 gallons a day right there, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, and I don't think we can solve all of it. I think we can get closer to that higher end number after we see if it works. I think one of the crucial things is making sure we're not impacting the system to meet the guidelines we've got to meet at the same time. And so, again, I need to look at the whole thing and think about it. I'm kind of slow on the thinking part, so.
yep. Yeah, I wanted to get it sooner and get it in the packet and all that.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, you can only bring it when you get it for sure, but I think, I mean, I definitely want to look at it and see. I mean, it could be that, I mean, there'd be someone that would want the service.
I'm sure somebody, I mean, you'd have some dumping there. Or now, you say septic, you're not gonna accept grease, right?
Mm-mm.
Just
I
septic
agree.
only, right?
Yeah.
You ever find out how big that tank is? Good.
Yeah, and it's, slam full is 22,000 gallons, so we wouldn't, you know, it would be a lower operating range than that, so figure maybe 18,000 gallons or something like that. So, I mean, there's the
How much
potential there.
I mean, ideally, what would you want to introduce to the plan today? Even if you don't-
What they recommended, the 8,000 gallons, but with that tank, you know, you got 18,000 gallons there, so potentially you could take more into that tank in a day than 8,000 gallons, but we wouldn't want to release any more of it to the plant. So when the tank's full, then have to cut them off.
I just think, I mean, if you get up to that 20,000 gallons, that would be ideal, but to spend $1 million for 8,000 gallons a day, I don't know that would be,
The payback will be quite a while,
exactly.
unless we weren't paying for it. Like if Jamie could come through with some money.
Some of it's average too. You got peaks and valleys on Monday.
That's right.
They're lined up the gate, Saturday, Sunday, they're not coming.
That's right. That's right. So if the tank's full on, I don't know how you would operate that, like you could have it full by Friday and there's another 8,000 those.
Yeah, or release it overnight, you know, whenever it's flows.
Assuming you get receiving money on it loads, if they're not coming some days, you got days where they have nothing coming. You're not doing the average revenue,
That's right.
so you're only assuming that you're gonna get that revenue every day. Everybody dry spells, you're not getting that revenue. Good point. Yeah, good point. But if it's 20,000 gallons, was fine.
That's right.
Either or.
Now,
Exactly.
Cody, on your break-even number that they figured for you, was that just on the OVM of it?
That was total
That
cost.
total investment cost and everything?
Not the construction of the equipment and all that, the upfront cost of it. That was, you're right, that's just the operation maintenance for the annual. Just break even.
One way to look at it, board points, you know, if we get a grant paid for the installation, somebody's going to use it.
Oh, yeah, that'd be cool.
Not somewhere else, like the east side place, don't mind. It would just be an option for if we could get, if the loads are, at least help out some.
I don't know what Alachua County is now. They take it at their treatment, city over there. Last time I talked to them, they were at 8 gallons. Where they're at now. 11 cents a gallon. That's gonna be 200 $20 or $30 per septic tank, $1,000 tank to dump. That's what the dumping fee.
Gonna be a $500,
So
$600,
request,
gonna be a $500 pump.
$500.
What do they charge, over Bradford, by the gallon?
Yeah, I think this is a good step, though. I think, I definitely want to look through it a little bit more and see, you know, what we need to do, or what I think was the right thing to do. But I do think if we can fund it, there's a way to do it. And I don't think we need to, you know, match the rates other places, because there are some other intrinsic things that we have in our favor, like location. Because if you're on the north side of Columbia County, I mean, it's even the cost per the dumping's gonna be less expensive than what the diesel is to haul it if you gotta go to bring it from to a. And especially if man is filling up that vehicle the other day, seeing the diesel cost, whoo. Crazy. But yeah, so I think that's the next step is, I think if everybody get a copy of that, then we could just put that on at the next meeting to talk about that, moving it forward. Okay. And I think, any more questions? Anything else anybody needs to say? Is the next meeting good, August 18th? And then after that, we'll see how often we need to meet, if monthly still needed, or if we got a lot of projects, so we start building.
August 9th
19th,
is one of our board,
yeah, y'all meet on
it's gonna be a long day.
Yeah, we do, 17th and the 19th. You wanna
You really wanna do that right?
You wanna postpone 2 weeks? You go postpone.
Whatever you want to do. Want to move it earlier or later?
What about the following week?
Anything,
25th?
I'll be honest with you, I like to do all my meetings for a week, that gives me.
Well, you need to say in town.
Ain't no matter what it's gonna be.
I propose tentatively the 25th.
Probably got a trip planned out.
I think it's the fifth, I think, be in Oklahoma.
Oh, you are gonna be out of town. Well, we can, man, I don't know. Any other dates?
August 18th. You work at midnight? Keep me out this late, my wife.
The 17th, we have a budget hearing. 17th and the 19th, city budget hearing. Yeah, isn't that right? 17th and the 19th.
If we propose to move it back another week or something, 3 weeks, we'd meet again.
Yeah, maybe we should just meet in September. Let's do that. Let's postpone it till September, but Steve Brown will be here in August. Yeah, me and you's gonna have a meeting. All right, and with that, this meeting is adjourned.
We have a friend on the boat tonight.